Whenever you're ready. Okay,
Yes.
the lights are on.
We've got a full house here.
It's one of those nights.
Curious.
I know, everything's a little bit thrown off.
Okay, let's come to order and start the Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting for April 2nd, 2014. We are recording this meeting, and video will be made, and we are going to be on the one of the local TV channels. Pete's already told us that he's going to be recording parts of the meeting. If anybody else is going to make any kind of recording of this meeting, please let us know. Okay, our usual reminders of please turn off your cell phones and take any extra conversations out into the hall. Okay, with that, don't think I forgot anything. We'll go to the public meeting, public comment. Richard?
Thank you. I just want to discuss a situation that we ran into at the Board of Health last week. It concerns a property that's already come before the Conservation Commission out at Codfish Park. It involves the replacement of a repair of a septic system, and as such, that repair was mandated to contain an alternative design technology system from the Conservation Commission. My concern is that the Conservation Commission, and maybe I'd like to ask the Conservation Commission if they would consider rescinding that portion of the order for this particular property. Because as you can see on the maps that I've just handed you here, the subject property is located on Codfish Park, right on that road that abuts the beach that then abuts the ocean. If you look at the plan that I have, you can tell where the ocean is by the arrow on the right-hand side. The large arrow on the bottom denotes the groundwater flow. If one looks at the groundwater flow, it's pretty obvious that the leach facility does not pose a threat to any other wells or properties in the area that are habitated or could ever be habitated, nor does it pose a threat to any of the wetlands. And my concern is that this is perhaps an expense that may not be necessarily needed for the property. We have another one coming very shortly before you, and I'm hoping that the alternative technology portion of the leach facility could not be imposed on the next property, as it is very much the same situation, and that the board may consider, in its wisdom, removing that requirement from this particular application.
So to do that, we'd actually have to amend the order. The applicant would have to request it, but I think what they're looking for is a sense of if they'd be willing to hear that as an amendment. This is the procedure we'd have to follow.
Do we know when this was issued?
Paul Santos? Remember? I want to say it was in
June of
2012?
2013. Maybe June of 2013, around that time.
So it's not in yet.
No, this is just coming from the Board of Health for a variance request,
Okay.
which the board did grant. And they did
Okay.
have a wonderment as to why the alternative technology was in place on the property.
So I don't think you need to take any action at the moment. We can't amend the permit from this position, but
I'll just add, I know when we were doing the fertilizer committee, we had a long discussion about properties like on the East Coast and things that did, flush directly into the ocean instead of into one of the harbors or into a wetland, as really not being a huge concern. But it just seemed like in that case it would be onerous to try to go through Nantucket, parcel by parcel or whatever, and go, okay, this area is okay, this area is not. Oh, there's a little pocket wetland here, we can't do it here, So we didn't have concern, but there wasn't as much concern about, the open ocean, at least at this stage of the game. But Who knows what'll happen in the future if there's atmospheric deposition gets much worse.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Certainly the state, Massachusetts Environmental Trust and Poundstown Center for Coastal Studies, along with every group on the Cape, including McCoy Bay and Buzzards Bay and several different embayments, have been measuring nitrate offshore, in this case offshore for Nantucket Sound. And we can see increased levels of nitrate from septic systems that go into Nantucket Sound. Now, they don't have measurements on the east shore of Nantucket. But I would caution us, even though this might be something where it's completely, okay to give an approval to once it came back as a amended order by the applicant. But I caution us that at least in some areas, not all ocean is the same. And it depends on what the area is offshore, what kind of fisheries are there, what kind of currents are there. I would not be as willing to vote for this if it was, for instance, on the Diona side of the island, where consistently higher levels of nitrate are measured throughout the year, especially seasonally. So that's the only point. I mean, just because it's not going into a wetland doesn't mean it's not going into an important resource that we try to protect under our regulations. So that doesn't mean it's a problem in Codfish Park, but I just wanted to make that point.
Go ahead.
Well, if I understand Richard correctly, it's your professional judgment that it's not going to affect, it's not going to leach in any way.
Well, the leachate is obviously traveling with the groundwater out towards the ocean,
Right.
which has an awful lot of water. I don't have a number. I don't know if there is one.
What trillion?
Brian Howes from Woods Hole Oceanographic had once said the sound in the areas concerned would be the harbor and the ponds, and that the sound and the ocean have what he described as an almost infinite capacity to absorb the sorts of things that would come from what we call the anthropological uses of the.
So I guess
Now.
I guess the sense I'm getting is that if the applicant chose to, they could come back in with the amendment, and you guys would be willing to at least hear it.
Oh, yeah, we'd hear it, I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hear it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Richard.
I have a public comment too, if there's no one else.
Oh, Richard, while you're here, one of these days we would still like to get sort of a primer on the issues down in Nantucket with the
With the ACO.
yeah, with the ACOs and things.
And yes, I would love to come and do that for you.
Okay.
We often have extra time around 9 o'clock or so.
Oh, yeah. Keep us awake. It better be interesting and
I don't have
exciting.
anything else going on.
Okay. Thanks. Anything else from the public? Yeah, Ms. McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emily McKinnon for the Nantucket Land Council. I just wanted to take a brief moment to raise once again our concerns to you over the state of the Homer Pond Road bike path mitigation area. I just recently got back from vacation, was driving down the road and realized I think it's been, maybe it was August or September of last year when you guys last addressed the enforcement order that was issued last summer. And as a CR holder, I will tell you that we're in conversations with the town about trying to find a way to bring the site back into compliance with the CR, such as taking over responsibility for restoring some portions of the site, et cetera, et cetera. And we've been waiting to hear back from town council about that. But obviously our CR requirements aren't really of importance to you. And in the meantime, the town is still the permit holder for the bike path, and it is still their responsibility to maintain that site. I don't think the silt fences have really been maintained since before the winter season. Our understanding was that there was still some survey work and excavations to be done to make sure that the site elevations were appropriate and as proposed, and once again the planting season is upon us. I think I was standing up here about a year ago with concerns about the state of the site. So I just, maybe the administrator can work with the town to at least see that the silt fencing out there is maintained. It's, as you know, if you drive by, in a pretty sorry state, and I don't think anything's been done to that site for 6 months or more. So again, we are doing what we can from our end, but we need you to step up the enforcement and help to get this site moving forward and back into compliance. Thank you.
Thanks. It does look like out there that there is at least some vegetation on the banks, and they look like they're in a lot better shape this year than last year. They were just full of little rivulets and reel, and that's not so apparent out there. But the site has got a lot of water in it, so you really can't see if there's been much deposition into the wetland. Where last year you could see where the flow had silted some of it in. And when they pull the plug on Hummock Pond later in whenever that is, that'll be a lot more apparent because that pond usually drains when they do that. So, okay, anything else from the public? Yeah. Edie, it's the Ray night, I guess.
I don't know that other name. Edie Ray. I happen to be down at Jetties Beach today, and looking west along the beach, I noticed a very large front-end loader moving sand down the beach to what looks like a fixing the bluff project coming down from the cliff there. And it is after April 1st, and I believe that unless the applicant for that project has permission not to do this, I believe that any type of work like that, there needs to be a shorebird monitor walking in front of the equipment. I know I spoke to that about the SBPF stuff that was going on, or proposed stuff that was going on that might have gone after April 1st. So I didn't know if in that order of conditions it states that, and I'm wondering who might be enforcing that, because as we all know, the Jetties Beach area is a hotbed of piping flubber activity, and that is adjacent to that. So I just thought I would bring that up. I have photos if anybody cares to see.
I can address that tomorrow.
Okay, do we know about where they were going?
Oh,
It's really obvious. It's a big sort of unvegetated bank.
It's probably the
piling
Hinckley
sand.
Lane site that's there.
And they're accessing it via the public way at Hoyts Hollow. I mean, not Hoyts Hollow.
Are they at Jefferson?
Yes,
at the Gallon?
exactly. By the
Okay.
cliff side, yeah. They could actually access it via the Jetties Beach because that gate is still open and there are cars driving on it. So if they wanted to drive through that way, they could do so. But they were accessing it via the cliffside area, Cliffside Beach Club. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Edie. Anything else from the public?
I got something.
Okay, Jeff.
All right, we've had a lot of calls to the office this week, so I thought I'd take 2 minutes at the start of the meeting to talk about where to find the packet on the Newtown website, and then also where to find the Baxter Road information on the Newtown website, because it's a little bit different than before. So the primary web address for the town website is still the same. It's still the nantucket-ma.gov. And then it's pretty easy to navigate. I'll do the packet first, and then I'll show everyone how to get to the Baxter Road information. So to find the packet, if you just kind of hover over where it says Government on the web page, you find the Agendas and Minutes page. Hopefully the computer goes relatively quickly. You have a couple of choices. I apologize for the resolution here, but all you have to do is find, you can scroll down, or there's a way to select specifically to the Conservation Commission. You can go to the select a category, and the easiest way, I wish the screen was bigger, is to simply do the click off the all categories and just pick the Conservation Commission. Get the search. Bigger screen. And it will bring you right to a list of the dates. And one of the changes from last time to this time is you have a couple of options from here. Is you can pick tonight's meeting, or you can go all the way to the right, and under the download tab, you can get the things from the packet or some previous versions as well. I'll go the long way. So if you pick the April 2nd meeting, you're going to get brought to it's a simple white page with 3 different files. There's the meeting posting, the agenda in the packet, and you just simply click on where it says the packet, and we'll download just like normal. So that's how you get to that spot. So going forward, so if you're looking for like the April 19th meeting, it'll all appear in one place, and all of the meeting documents are all assembled together and separately. So if you want to go back in time and look at something from the February 5th meeting, you know it's from there. All of that stuff will be located. You don't have to scroll through a big list to get there. Now, the other one that we've gotten a lot of comments for, so I'll start from the front page again. To get back to the front page of the town website, all you have to do is click on the hanging Nantucket, Massachusetts sign. It will always take you back to kind of the cover page. So the Baxter Road information, to keep it a little bit separate, is under the Conservation Commission page itself. So if you just pick the government, and I'll go the long way again, you can just pick boards and commissions. Just find the Conservation Commission in the list. There's good information here sometimes too. There's a little tab that's out to the left, and it's just simply called Baxter Road Filing Information. If you click on that, we're still working on kind of repopulating it a little bit. We had some errors in transfer, and I do apologize for that. Is that if you look, there'll be headings for each specific project. So the one that's up and current is the Town of Nantucket SPPF GO2 project, and it's just like before. Just pick the file that you want, and if you would, the Apply Coastal memo from then, you click on it, and hopefully it downloads correctly. Fingers crossed. It's working from my PC this afternoon, so that it'll download and you can treat it as normal. So we're working on getting that stuff all transferred. Some of the stuff wasn't transferred correctly. This filing should be current, but some of the old ones, the revetment project and things, were up this morning, and there was an error with it, and we'll have it back up tomorrow morning. But everything should be there. So that's, if you have any questions or you can't find the page you're looking for us, please contact me at the office, and I'll try to get you to the right place. But we've had enough calls this week. I wanted to take 2 minutes at the front here and be sure everyone could see how to get to the two spots we've gotten the most calls for. So
You can always go and now watch the video and just follow along.
yes. Yeah, if you're looking for the video, it's really easy. It's actually at the bottom all the time. You can just click on the video on demand. That's always at the footer of the page. And then you can pick the, if we had Silverlight on this computer, you can pick the video that you wanted to. But it works the same way as the old one. So. And again, if anyone has any questions or problems, please get a hold of me and I'll get you to the right place. Or if you see there's something glaringly missing, please let us know. All right, on to the...
Okay, we're ready to start the meeting here. Yeah. I don't need the whole table.
And just for the record, since we haven't said it, Sarah Akte is on the phone. So as just as a reminder, when we take votes, we'll have to vote by roll call.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go to the public hearing notices of intent. And the following two applicants are continued to the 16th of the month. La Bombard at 62 West Chester Street, and the Nantucket Islands Land Bank at 17 and 19 North Liberty Street, Nate Wesco Place. Is there anybody here to address those items that can't come back on the 16th? Okay. So that takes us to the Town of Nantucket SPPF at 85 through 107A Baxter Road. This is the GO2 project.
Thank you, Kara Vesanowski, DPW Director. You received a letter under Josh Posner's and my signature, signed by Steve Cohen, asking the Commission to approve the project as is. And there's also a discussion about if the Commission chooses to allow plantings and returns, that's something that SPPF would consider. However, when the emergency permit was approved, there was a comment made about try it and let's see what happens. And what we'd like to do is approve it exactly the way it is standing at the moment, and with the monitoring that has been proposed, as well as the completion of the as-built drawings. And as we mentioned before, this is a temporary situation. There will be a commitment to remove it at the end of the 3 years and give the commission time to review the monitoring and so forth, so we can actually see what's going to happen with the tow stabilization in place. The SBPF is also interested, or willing, I guess is the better word, to put the revetment away to allow time to monitor what the effect of the tow stabilization is.
Okay. When you say put the revetment away, you mean withdraw it or just continue it further down the road?
I think for legal purposes, what we would do is a significant continuance of 6 months, 8 months, a year, something like that. But I don't know, it would make sense to throw out the whole legal record.
Well, to throw in on that really quickly, I think the better way, especially with the possibility of commission turnover, we're getting a new commissioner tonight in there, that I guess my recommendation to them, if they were to ask, would be to withdraw, because that way if they reapplied, all commissioners would be eligible to sit on it, and a significant continuance would rule out anyone that was new or replaced or had missed 2 hearings. So that's certainly to their discretion. They can do as they choose.
Either option is, we'd have to, what we'd like to do is take it off the table as an ongoing issue, and the details of how that's done is left.
Okay. Okay. So, there's basically no presentation planned.
What's there is what we like to leave and monitor and evaluate.
Okay. So we, what are we using as our notice of intent then?
Well, we have the regular application that was originally the 4 geotube design, and the design that they've submitted now would be the 3 geotube as-built that was provided in January.
Okay.
I know we had asked for some updates to that as-built, and I think it would be appropriate if there was, I know the letter references the possibility of bank plantings and returns, that those be included on a stamp plan, just to complete the record, to have the proper stamp plan of the final plan of record for the project.
If the commission decides that the plantings and the returns are something that you would entertain, we would certainly do that.
Okay. Well, so what we're looking for tonight is more a sense of the commission, if this is what we want to permit. Is that sort of where we're going here? Or?
I think that's exactly right, Mr. Chairman, that what we've been dealing with is presenting you with a lot of information, and then you have questions on that, and it keeps getting further developed, but we never get any sense of whether or not what we're talking about is approvable. And I think what the town has been pushing SBPF on is, let's reduce this to what's approvable and stop making it more complicated. And so that's what we'd like to do. So to the extent we can determine what is likely to be approvable, we would then submit whatever details or information are necessary for that, and, as we go forward. So a planting plan or details on the returns, or whatever we end up as likely to be approvable, we would target information towards that plan instead of all the things we'd really like to see, which we think would be put off.
Okay. Well, any comments?
Do we have any information about the function after this last storm? Because I think a lot of our discussion before, when we were initially looking at the emergency certification, was the 3 geotubes versus 2 geotubes and the jute tubes on top as far as supplying sand. So I wonder if we have any more information about what it actually did.
I know there is ongoing monitoring. We can get that information for you. I'm not certain they've been out since the storm.
So I've certainly been out there, Jamie Field for the record, and it looks like we lost between 1.5 yards and 2.5 yards. And the face of the second tube is exposed, but the system has held up kind of exactly as we thought it would. And the beach rebuilt itself. It dropped down to probably an elevation about 5, I would guess, from how much of the bottom tube was exposed during and immediately after the storm. And then and by the end of the day after, I believe it was Friday, that bottom tube was completely covered again, so the beach had recovered television.
Can you speak up? Sorry.
Oh,
Could you
I guess
come to
Sarah
the
can't,
mic?
I
Sarah,
think
do you want
Sarah
to-
can't hear you, sorry.
Sorry, Sarah. Basically, I said that I was out there. The system functioned as we expected it to. It's fully intact. That we lost somewhere between 1.5 yards and 2.5 yards during the storm. And the beach had gone down to about elevation 5 during the storm, and has fully recovered to elevation 8 since the storm within about 24 hours.
No additional nourishment has been put there since the storm?
Actually, that's something that I hope comes up tonight, because under the cease and desist order, we can't do anything without your permission. We would like to get back out there, and we'd like to nourish 6 to 8 cubic yards per lineal foot, which would replace what was taken during the storm, and it would also allow us to get some stockpiling on top of the system there that we could, then just send a dozer or something down and push it down the face to contribute as needed in the future. And this way, there's not a lot of truck traffic. So I believe that the idea is to do deliveries 2 or 3 times a year. I think it's laid out right now as 3 times a year.
So additional trucks of sand would need to be dumped over the edge, and one piece of equipment to spread that out.
So, Jimmy, there was no loss of sand on the top of the geotube?
So, Mr. Chairman, maybe before we wander all over the place on this, I know there's a whole bunch of people here that are interested in this, and it gets complicated to understand where we are and what hearing we're hearing and so forth. And what I think we just heard, this idea of a sense of the commission of what could be approved, sounds to me a little upside down and backwards. That I know when we get wandering off, I always want to say let's focus on what's before us to act on, and people are entitled to apply for whatever they want to apply for, and our job is to act on that and to figure it out. And I just want to note that and want to suggest I think we want to know what we're being asked, and then deal with it, and not sort of get into a confusing sort of, we might kind of approve something sort of like this, and be starting all over again in 2 weeks or a month.
I think, if I may read from the letter that we got.
I was just trying to get back to it, yeah.
This one, we seek an order of conditions for the CES as built plus returns to be made of biodegradable material.
For the CE.
Coastal engineering structure.
You are the softest voiced people I've ever heard in my life.
Sorry.
All of you. I hope you're carrying a big stick.
Anyway, they asked for the returns and a revegetation, and if that's acceptable, we would drop other features from this NOI, including the request for a 4th tier, the request to activate the drainage pipe, and the request for further augmentation of the bluff. May I ask, does that mean that you don't want to add any additional sand from the sand that is already there for the angle of repose, or are you still asking us for the full 900 feet?
We do want to nourish the sand as was originally required in the emergency, up to the 22 cubic feet per foot.
I'm not sure I followed the question. Do you mean?
Were you talking about the bluff face?
I'm talking about the bluff face.
I think he's talking about the bluff face itself.
no.
The bluff face.
So
just-
when that letter says that we would not pursue the augmentation, that's above the template. It's the bluff face.
Thank you.
Now, there may be individual property owners who might come in for that issue, but SBPF would leave it alone for a while.
Yeah. Okay.
So, from what I'm hearing from Kira, is basically they're seeking to permit what's on the ground out there now, without without the returns and without the planting on the bank, at least at this point, that would be something you'd come back for if you decided to do it?
That would require a whole new notice of intent if the
Okay.
Commission decided not to do that right now.
Yeah, well, we'd like to include that.
Oh, you want to include that now?
Yeah.
That they're asking for that if
the
we are
commission
amenable
does.
to that. If we're not, then they want us to go.
I think the easy way, and I think this will address Michael's concern, is if that's what the suggested is to actually have a plan that shows this portion that's as-built, and then the design portion for the plantings and the returns included on the single plan for you guys to look at and review, where it's all in one place and clearly spelled out. I think that's probably the easiest way to address that.
Easiest way to go, yeah.
I mean,
so you have it right.
it's the basic requirement of the filing is to have a complete plan of record at the end that shows the project in totality. I mean, that's the same requirement for all applications.
So we did bring up the subject earlier about a recreational capacity in terms of stairs going down, and I believe you were amenable to that, having public access?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So that would be part of the application too?
Yes.
And then, as a monitoring component, I went back to the NOI that SBNP, as it was called then, produced in that large report in 2007, and about fishery resources, and basically had cross-sectional scans of the bottom. And so could that also be a component to see what was actually happening up and down drift?
You mean as ongoing monitoring?
Yes, but the actual ocean floor. Let me present this. I think, Tara, didn't I show you a copy of this a while back?
I think so. I can add it to the
So,
Jeff might know the answer, but I think that's part of the ongoing Woodsville Group survey. Is that right?
The Whistle Group does do a certain portion from the shore out. I'm not positive on the actual distance,
Yeah.
but I know it's not a very significant distance. I know they get to essentially the watermark and get a bit below to verify that location, but I don't think they get out any greater distance than probably even 50 feet from the shore, from their ongoing measurement out there.
this is considerably further. And so, and it was a component that in 2007 the applicants were, when that was, trying to get the replenishment from
Yeah.
3 miles out. So,
Right.
and it seemed that would allay some concerns as to what was happening, in terms of the change of dynamics with GO2.
Well, I don't know that we would do the same as that, and frankly, I wasn't involved with that, and I couldn't tell you how much it is, but, I know that involved both a significantly higher amount of sand on the beach as well as, the dredging and everything, but if there was an issue with you wanted to do more near-shore monitoring of the impact, we could probably come up with a number that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Andy, any thoughts?
Well, I was just curious what the engineer thought about. I mean, did she not feel that the returns were so important?
They are belt and suspenders. It is a good thing to have for end scour, but the reason I've been pushing SBPF to stay with what's there is to limit the amount of equipment on the beach. And it just requires more diligence in maintaining the sand on the ends.
And the returns that we're talking about would be both biodegradable and not excavated into the bank, but I want to be clear that they would be filled and maintained in the manner that you have currently approved for the terracing down to the south. We wouldn't bring back the pump system. So it would be, essentially consistent with the activity that's already occurring.
Well, and I've heard that there are plovers up at Sacajus, so we're into that season where they could be wandering down into this project now. So that's going to complicate life a bit down there if that's going to happen now.
And it might be that we wait out the season, or that we employ shorebird monitoring precautions. That's certainly an issue that we've worked with.
We definitely expect that that would be a requirement in the order of conditions.
Okay. Well, I would think the basic order is sort of, the notice is kind of put together in previous incarnations of this, so it shouldn't be that much to sort of just fold it all together and bring it back in.
Right. What I think we do is come back with a plan that shows the as-built, and if you're amenable to it, with returns, as well as a construction program for returns, a monitoring program, a maintenance program, and an order of conditions that would have proper conditions, as well as failure criteria and things, which we've already discussed quite a bit, so we wouldn't start from scratch. And we would present that to you for your further review and consideration. But what we want to do is start presenting things that are within the realm that you're likely to approve, although you're going to commit to any blank check. But that's what we want to do, is get some idea that conceivably that's approvable.
Since it's
I
there,
think we'd like that if we got things in here that were approvable.
Since it's there, it makes sense to monitor the effects, and I think it's going to be a lot of good information to move forward with. That has been a question mark up until now.
And just so you know, the commission, I have listed 10 things that the commission asked for last time, that we are collecting all of those things now, and instead of just continuing for 2 weeks without providing anything, we wanted to take this opportunity to try and have a more effective conversation instead of just waiting and doing another document dump in 2 weeks. But we do have most or all of the things that you asked for in progress.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. I think it's a great idea to list the project as is and an as-built, and to get the monitoring and pay attention to what's happening. I think that the returns might be helpful. It'd be good to see them on a plan. I agree with everyone on that. We had asked last time, I think it was Mike had asked about having independent review of this, and is that still appropriate? Or I think it might be to look at their plan with the as-built, which of course is in place with the 3 GO2s and the current nourishment. My question probably for an external reviewer would probably be on the revegetation, whether it's useful and helpful and what that entails. That's why I bring it up. But I do like the idea of restricting the project to the size it is now and watching to see what it does. I agree with Ian too that it's important to see what it does underwater. We would want it to cover, by asking for a lot of nourishment, which I think this project needs. We want to make sure that it's going to places that we expect it to go and not just going straight out and covering the top. So those are the comments I wanted to make, and I'll be happy to see a plan, and I think it's great that they're considering this and just monitoring it for a while, because that's the question I got for last. Thanks.
Okay. Well, am I picking up that as kind of a consensus here?
Yeah, it works for me.
Okay. Let's go to the public and just see if there's any. Bam?
Hi, Bam Lafarge. I've been down there a couple of times since the storm, and I think that since it's worried that ultraviolet light hurts the tubes, there's an exposed tube there now, and I guess I'm wondering when they'll be covered. Another thing is that I would call it a 3-month storm. That is perhaps on average occurring 4 times a year. That's my guess. I'm not an engineer. I've just been watching it. But in that storm, and as you know, we had a north wind. There was fairly significant end scour at the north end. Just in that storm. So I think you need some kind of return on it. It was not a big storm, and I think you need to protect it. There'll be one at the south end. That hasn't happened yet. So, I'm just hoping nourishment will happen soon. I think it's necessary, however you do it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could comment on the nourishment, I just want to be clear that the DEP order and your order both require us to provide the nourishment consistent with the DEP's plan, and we intend to do that. And I don't think that the enforcement order actually prevents that, but we just want to get a nod from the commission or from staff as to how you want us to do that to make sure that we don't do it in a way that is going to cause some other problem. So I don't know if you want us to submit a plan through staff or something like that, but we think we could do it now, but we don't want to do it on our own and then wind up with some concern that could have been addressed that wasn't.
And that said, we'd love to do it right away.
Well, I think that's a good idea to have that sand over that tube, and again to have it available for, just in case we get it, which it's not unlikely we can get nor'easters into May.
Right. So if the commission's comfortable with it, we'll submit a plan through staff and just assume that unless there's an objection or unless the staff thinks it should come to the commission, that we will provide the extra sand that's supposed to be required under the existing order. Is that workable?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You okay with that, Jeff?
I'll do whatever you guys tell me to do. So.
Yeah, I think it's good to get the sand out.
Edie?
Edith Ray, don't want to beat a dead horse. I did hear, I think it's Michael mentioned that he wanted to be moving sand around by bulldozers as part of the renourishment. I just want to make sure that it's written in the order that you think about writing in the order of conditions that every motorized vehicle on the beach after April 1, which it now is accompanied by a qualified shorebird monitor, not just some Joe off the street that saw a bird once. It's bulldozers, it's pickups, it's bobcats, any motorized vehicles, that's the requirement. And I just wanted to, again, say that. Thank you.
I think that's important. Yeah. Okay, so is everybody okay? Okay. Yeah, Emily?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emily McKinnon for the Nantucket Land Council. We are certainly in support of moving towards closure of this public hearing process. And with that in mind, there's sort of just a couple of thoughts that I wanted to bring up now. And one was recalling back when this notice of intent was first filed that I think it was filed as a limited project. And there was a lot of discussion about that back in the day. And at this point, I can't remember how or if that issue was resolved. And before the hearing's closed, it might be something worth just addressing again and making sure that that's been filed appropriately. And if not, how that can change. I would just refer the commission back to a letter that I think was dated November 20th, 2013, that I submitted outlining our concerns with regards to regulatory compliance. I also just wanted to point out a couple of observations or thoughts from our perspective after last week's storm. I think a couple of things that are important to note are, as you heard, the nourishment, the way that it is being supplied, a large portion of it with these storms is not available to the system. And that's something that perhaps can be addressed in an order with placement requirements or not, I'm not sure. But I think that it is certainly a concern because you have a significant portion of that annual nourishment that in these storms, unless there is a much bigger storm, isn't really going to be available to the system. We do still have some ongoing concerns with how the nourishment is being provided, and again, that beach sand was placed in the first geotube. But the other thing that the last storm made me want to bring to your attention also is this volume of mitigation nourishment that we've been discussing basically for years. It's a really important number, of course, and where it's placed is also really important so that it's actually available to the system. But I just want everyone to keep in mind that that is really being provided for those downdrift resource areas. And it's important because we can't really monitor those areas. We can't watch them. We don't know where all that sand's actually going, which is why we just have to make sure that it's all being provided on an annual basis. But because that's unconsolidated and it's obviously going to be washed away at a faster rate, even if we place all of that annual nourishment in front of the structure at a time and it's washed away, then you have the exposed geotubes, as we're sort of seeing down there. And you're left with this structure that, if it's not continually supplied with sediment, is going to be impacted by storm surges and tidal cycles, and that beach is going to erode and disappear. And so that nourishment mitigation is really important for the downriver resource areas, but you also have to keep in mind those impacts that are going to occur immediately adjacent of the structure.
Wouldn't you say this is one of the limitations of the geotube construction?
Mm-hmm.
So then that would, are you asking us to formally revisit the choir?
Well, again, I guess pointing out to my November 20th letter, one of our big concerns is when you look at the performance standards, we think that this project, the geotube structure, requires waivers, and we do think that there are going to be these ongoing long-term adverse impacts that can't be mitigated for, and so therefore, no, we don't really think that it's preventable under the regs, and that is in the November 20th letter, and those concerns.
Right.
But I just sort of wanted to raise that issue to you again, that this mitigation volume is for downriver resource areas, and it's really important because we can't really see what's going on there. We can see what's happening around the structure, and again, having that hard structure exposed is going to be an ongoing problem for that beach and the immediately adjacent areas. And then I guess just finally, I think it would probably be helpful, I know you all seem to come to sort of a consensus as to what you want to see from the applicant, but maybe what the applicant's looking for, and probably what the public and we would certainly love to know as well, in order to sort of focus our resources and comments in the future, is if what is now being proposed, what's out there, if there's a general sense that that is permissible or not from the commission, that would sort of, I think, give everyone a better idea of how to focus our final comments as you bring the hearing to a close. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dirk?
My name is Dirk Roggeveen. I represent the Quidnet Squam Association. I don't know whether you get an opportunity to get down there on the beach during the storm or after the storm. I know some of you probably more than others. There's an enormous amount of photographs that get put up online. The Van Loos take pictures. Susan Landman takes pictures. They circulate through Facebook pages and whatnot. So there's lots of opportunity to see the photographs about what happened during the storm. And I don't know whether you might want to direct the administrator to actually print out some of those so they go into the record or something, because we all are aware of what's happening, but none of it's actually preserved in an official way that we might want to preserve it to look at this project later. But
do you have any of that to submit here for us? Are you submitting any of that here this evening?
I could, but that places the expense on us, and you actually have the budget and the capacity and the staff who actually can get this stuff. If I were sitting there, I would direct the staff to go and take pictures myself. But
get onto Facebook during the day and kind of rummage around.
I submitted some pictures to talk the next day, and also to Jeff, so I think it's part of the record.
Computers like
as
locked
well
on
as
Facebook, are they? They allow you to do it?
Dirk's website, so I think everyone's seen it pretty closely.
Yes, they're good pictures. They give you a perspective if you're not going to climb down to the beach yourself. But what they show, if you do want to take a chance to look at them, is that the storm came in, whatever the 3-month storm, and it almost immediately washed away the sand that was in front of the. It's the second tube because the first one's buried. So it's essentially in terms of how the ocean faces the beach, it's the primary barrier that it's going to hit. And that sand disappeared, and then the water just was hitting against that exposed geotube, which could be an exposed concrete wall at that point. No matter what it's made out of, it's not giving away sand. And all that nourishment and sand and everything that's piled from there up on top on that slope, that just stayed where it was. That wasn't actually going into the system. That wasn't contributing during the storm. It was just parked up there on top. And then the beach dropped, and you can see that the beach dropped, and more of that tube as exposed. It went around the ends. I don't know whether there was erosion on the banks further up, because although that was a, it was a nice nor'easter, what we have now is we've constructed this wall, but it's not where the bank is. It's a wall that's like 60 feet out from where the bank is. So of course it's going to get eroded, and it may be that the ocean never actually reached the bank if you go up, 50, 60 feet either direction. So I think you want to get a sense of whether, because if it didn't take the banks, then those banks weren't contributing sediment. Okay, so then I guess it doesn't really matter whether the geotube's contributing sediment either. But if it's dropping the level of the beaches north and south, like typically takes place in nor'easters, it drops the level of the beach first, then it starts attacking the bank. But the dropping of the beach is putting all that sand into the system, and right in front of the geotube structures, that's not happening, because essentially you have that solid tube that's just reflecting the wave energy. So there is a loss of sand into the system. Can you put your finger on where it is? No. It's just less sand. It's like less ink in the milk, and somewhere in there it's there, but it's hard to pick it out and where it went. But the net effect is you're robbing the system of sand. So unless we craft a better way of injecting the sacrificial sand nourishment into the system during the storms when it's being erosional, all that sand is, it's nice to count the numbers, but it's actually not contributing and helping the way the system works downdrift. So my clients' concerns are that this still hasn't addressed their issues, which is that downdrift beaches are going to be, over time, robbed of sediment and diminished in terms of size. It'll diminish plover habitat just north up by Sacagawea Pond, the barrier beach, and then the beaches to the north of that, which provide storm damage prevention to the houses up in Quinnet and Swamp. So we would look for you guys to ask the applicants to somehow craft a better way of injecting sand into the system when it's needed during storm events such as we just witnessed. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
It seems to me that, the two alternatives are either a choir on top or having a front-end loader working while the storm is taking place, pushing sand off.
Well, there is an alternative, which is the core on the bottom. Because if it's actually getting pounded by the water, it starts releasing the sand through the holes in the fabric. Yeah. And that sand it's eroding, but it's not eroding as quickly as an exposed bank would erode. But it's nevertheless putting the sand into the system at that time, which is why we've always advocated that as a soft solution. We've seen it work on that bank, up and down, over the last 10 years. It works. It does cost money to replace. It needs to be rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt. That's the nature of it. But the alternative is causing, and my clients maintain will cause, environmental damage down the run to the coastal bank, and the dunes and the beaches and whatnot.
Well, and just a comment, it's really hard to know how much sand the storm would have taken from the bank, because the only number we really have is that somewhat, controlled 22 cubic yards per linear foot that we sort of came up with as an average number based on a lot of different methods of estimating that number. But we don't know what any one storm contributes. And if this storm took 6 to 8 cubic yards per linear foot, we really don't know what this storm would have done on a bank. We just don't have those numbers. So I think the important thing is that what we need to have is, on average, we lose 22 yards per year, one way or the other. And I guess I'm a little confused because I thought there was 2 volumes of sand coming. The 22 cubic yards per linear foot for mitigation sand, which is to be lost every year, and the sand that's piled up on top that's basically semi-permanent sand.
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so I guess what we really need here is monitoring and, constant, monitoring reports, not only on an annual basis, but as an on-storm basis and things, and then we start making adjustments to make sure we're using up that sand every year. And it may take us a little while to get to that balance, but I think that's going to be something very important for the commission to do over the next 3 years, is to come up with a way to make sure that, this sand is getting into the system.
And that it's being monitored.
And it's being monitored, yes.
Yeah, Jamie?
Jamie?
I just want to respond to a few of the things that have been said. So, having been on the beach several times immediately after the storm and since, I was looking at the quarter tubes that are down there, and none of them were fully deflated, as I've seen in past storms, 2-3-day nor'easters last year. So I would say a typical 3-foot coir bag has roughly half a cubic yard per lineal foot in it, I believe. And so just observing, everything from, I think I got to down the beach at 67 north to the system, there was very little contribution from all of those terrace projects. And so for what we did geometrically in front of the tubes, I mean, it's hard to average it exactly, but like I said, it's somewhere between a yard and a half and 2.5 yards that were contributed. So I would say that we have contributed, at least in this storm, significantly more than is being contributed updrift and downdrift by the terrace. It's hard, none of us can say where there is no protection how much contribution there was. And then just in regards to the way the template is set up, we contributed 8 cubic yards during the construction process. And we ended up with about 14 cubic yards on top of the sand template as it started. And so if we've lost, call it 2, there is still obviously sand on top of the system. And the idea is that that's there and we can push it down rather than having to send the trucks every time that we want to get some sand out there after a storm or before a storm. If we leave a template on top of the 3rd tier, we can send the dozer down there and they can basically just push more sand down. So right now there's 3 feet on top of that, and as part of this next contribution, we'd like to build that up, and that way you may be able to push it down 3 times before you need to have more trucks come. That's the end.
Okay, Corm?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier from Nantucket Land Council. Emily and I are going to tag team this because I submitted something last week when she was away, and I just wanted to reference it, and I also wanted to follow up on a couple of issues. Yes, this permit is still being applied for as a limited project, and if you remember way back when Jim Mahala, the state representative from DEP, was on island, he specifically stated that it was not allowable as a limited project when it got to the notice of intent process. So it's a glaring hole. It probably can be dealt with on the applicant's part if they address that issue and maybe don't apply for it as a limited project and come back and do the appropriate waiver request like it's been requested. But again, if it's approved as a limited project, DEP already has said specifically, and Jeff was there, the applicants were there, I can't remember if you guys were there, but he said straight out that it's not, can't be approved as a limited project. And again, that was just for the emergency permit, so he obviously allowed the emergency permit to go forward, but he had specifically stated that when they come to the notice of intent, as applied for. I do want to reference a letter that I did submit, and just a helpful suggestion to staff in terms of how the website is actually listed. It's all listed by alphabetical now and not by date, so it's sort of confusing on what was submitted in the past week. So if you go to my submission, which is NLC submission 2004-328, I took a walk and had noted that there was some items that were part of the project were not contemplated in the original emergency permit, which is from their web, which is already submitted. As you can see, the scour apron wraps around behind the geotubes. Well, what they have, and I believe this is what they called it, there's plastic sheeting that was used throughout the process, which is now completely, not completely, but is exposed and showing. And if that's the scour apron, it's put in the complete wrong place. And from what our engineers have said, you don't use plastic sheet as scour apron, use something a lot stronger. So I'm really confused what that plastic sheeting is, and it's actually, if it's not part of the scour apron, I have other comments, so I see Cara sort of stepping over, so maybe she could answer that. Just what is it? What's the purpose?
The plastic sheeting was a construction vehicle that kept the water that was coming out of the upper tube from infiltrating into the lower tube. So it should have been removed, and they will be removed as they're seen. They were removed mostly. SBPF, I know, is not happy that they're showing up now, and they will be removed.
Okay.
Can I just add a little bit to that, Karen? The plastic sheeting was used to divert the water. So when we were working on the second tube and we were filling the second tube, of course the water comes gushing out. And we had a template set up where we had a pump in the hopper and all of that directly seaward of that second tube. And so as to not undermine it or erode that template of standout that was supporting the hopper and the pump, we would use the plastic to just divert it around. And so obviously we're regretful that there was any plastic that got left behind. We certainly tried to be very diligent about any construction debris being left on the beach, and we had a dumpster that got filled every day at the end of the construction. I don't know if it got buried during it. Obviously it was unintentional, but it's not throughout the project. It's not something that was intentionally incorporated in some way that we didn't talk about. It's a piece of plastic that somehow accidentally got left behind. And as soon as I saw it on the beach, we sent somebody out there immediately, and we cut it out, and we disposed of it properly.
Okay, if I could, Mr. Chairman, this sort of exemplifies my frustration that there has not been a narrative of the construction process. We're now learning something that they did, which was never part of the narrative or part of the application. And from my understanding is that you are leaning towards approving a project that if I didn't bring that up, we wouldn't even know that it happened, because there's no narrative explaining what they did. And again, I said this last time, it's very easy. All you have to do is write what they did. And they basically have done stuff that we didn't know that they did until it actually is exposed. And again, one of the pictures, it's fairly obvious that this stuff is ripping and was ripping during the storm. And this isn't some sort of silly statement that this what they did this, and oh my God, how they did this, it wasn't permitted. No, this is non-biodegradable material going out into the ocean. And that is a fairly significant issue. So if it's in the system in terms of the project and it's being exposed and ripping during storm events, I don't see how he's going to get down there during storm events and get rid of it. He only can get rid of the stuff that's left over. It's very, very frustrating from a standpoint from the Land Council. And then in terms of where you're heading, and again, we do appreciate things in the public interest and everybody's interest that we start wrapping this up. We just want to get an understanding by the end of the meeting that if you are, again, we feel that this is not a permittable project under your rules and regulations, that you either head in that direction, or if you are heading in the direction of issuing an order, the order is the key. That the findings and the conditions are the key to potentially addressing a lot of concerns from the public and the Land Council. And it's so important in terms of how that order is written. First and foremost, how are we going to determine that this is temporary? In 3 years' time, I think they're saying 3 years' time. In 3 years' time, the applicant specifically just stated again, and I really appreciate it, that they are committed to taking it out. How is that going to be binding on a future commission when the applicant comes back for amended order of conditions and says we don't want to take it out? There's potentially some innovative ideas that can be explored that go beyond what has been done in the past, and I hope that you guys think about those a little. Perhaps some discussions with the actual owner of the land, the town of Nantucket, and how they would potentially be bound on taking that out in 3 years would be very important. And then to follow that up in terms of the findings and the conditions, the mitigation is so important in terms of the timing and how that actually is
Could we
placed.
hold off on the findings and conditions on something until we have a plan and a notice in front of us that we're hearing it on? I think we're getting.
Since it's a
Scrambled up
public
ahead of
hearing
ourselves.
and we're concerned about the mitigation, it's fairly
We've been talking about
jointly
mitigation
tied
already.
to my points. Specifically, if you're going to be proposing mitigation that essentially
I'm going to ask again,
says
Mr.
like
Chairman,
says
if
like
if
this.
photos are going to be submitted for the commission to review, they should be submitted.
This is in your file of my submission. It's on your computer.
Thank
Can
you
you
for that reference.
identify for the public the picture that you're showing, what it's up?
You can come up here.
So, yeah, just explain it.
Yeah, we see.
Yeah, this is the photo that specifically states what Emily and Dirk have said, that if the mitigation amounts are not supplied in here up to 22 cubic yards on average a year, you basically are not providing that to the system. And that's what I'm saying in terms of how the order is written, and how the specifics are written. Again, the onus is going to be on Jeff to get out there and make sure that is done. So you have to write an order that really allows him to do the best job possible. He can read the report, but again, he's going to have to go out there and make sure. Thank
Well,
you.
I think that, hopefully part of that will be addressed by an independent monitoring capacity.
We definitely would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond to one thing. First of all, most of the things that Emily and Cormac and other members of the public had said, I think are in agreement with where we're going. I'm not objecting to those things. I think we're basically going in mostly the same direction here. But on the temporariness issue, there's a tendency to abbreviate it, and it's a more complicated issue. And I just want to, for the record, I've done it before, and I'll probably do it every time the issue comes up, is just be very clear that what's being applied for is a 3-year permit. And there is an intent that it could be extended by you, if you choose to do so, for up to 3 1-year periods. And that during that time, there would be a determination that it would either be replaced or abandoned or removed, depending on the facts. There's no hard commitment that this is a 3-year project and nothing else ever, and then it's just going to be ripped out at 3 years. It's 3 years while we monitor and look at it and see if we do this, if we do something else, if maybe it fails in the interim and we walk away. I don't know. There's a lot of options on the table, and it's temporary, but it's not isolated. Okay, so I don't want anybody saying, "Oh, how dare you? I'll come back for something else later." This is going to continue, but this permit is clearly for something that needs to be replaced later by something approved by you or not. And if we get to the point where it's failed, or you don't approve anything else, or whatever, the escrow will be in place for removal. So it's not going to be how can we ever get it removed. The escrow will be there. But nobody should ever leave the room thinking that in 3 years this is all going to go away. I don't know that that's likely.
But you did commit to filing a new notice of intent for keeping.
That's right. Yeah, this project could not be kept without an extension and a new notice of intent, because even the extensions couldn't be permanent. So there would have to be something new no matter what. And it might be this, and it might be something else.
Okay, so what I'm thinking here is that, based on the discussions I've heard, what we really need to see is a notice of intent as discussed earlier, and then we can discuss it based on what's actually in front of us, instead of, like Mike says, we're kind of doing a lot of conjecture here, and it's not really clear what we're talking about because it's not right there. So I think we mostly know what we're dealing with, but should we go with that? Is that the sense of the commission?
Please.
Shall we move on?
Do you want us to show the planting of the slope and the returns on the plans?
I'll keep it simple for this one. If that's what you're asking for and is part of the design, then yes.
Yeah, if that's what you prefer, we can discuss it away instead of having to have to come back and come back. Put in what you want, and then we'll go with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we continue? Is that the...
Do you want to request a case to the?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
We have the maintenance issue where we've we've got that.
Can we just allow?
Yeah.
We'll submit a written proposal to staff telling him what we're planning on doing, and if he has an objection or concern, he can either deal with it directly or through the commission. But the intention would be to get the mitigation stand out there as soon as possible.
And make sure you include some candidates for your shorebird monitor. And Jeff will know if they're qualified or not.
For the mitigation, yeah.
Yeah. For any vehicles on
I
the
think
beach.
it's important to have the construction protocol. I agree with Cormac that, and I think maybe Dirk, there's a few things that have come up that have been exposed by storms, so we need to have a very detailed list of what they've done up to date, not just a plan, which is extremely helpful, and then the notice, but also what their construction protocol was. And we asked that for much smaller projects, and I think that's very appropriate here.
Because there were some things we weren't aware of.
That can be provided.
Okay. Deanne.
My concern has always been for the beach, and it seems to me from the photographs and what we have observed, as well as from the science, that the beach in front of the hard armoring is going to disappear. And I have not heard any submission from the applicant about how they intend to maintain, if they even do intend to maintain, any of the public beach in front of the geotube installation. And the beach is a resource that I understand is protected by the bylaw. So I hope you would take that into consideration. The geotube installation from the schematic, at least the latest, or the one that was submitted maybe in the fall, shows that the property line between private property and town-owned land falls just about in the middle of the installation. So the beach most at risk is the public beach. So that's my first point. My second point is, well, I appreciate Mr. Golding bringing up the whole issue of public access and maybe steps down to the geotubes. I find that public access almost inappropriate. I'm thinking less of vertical than horizontal. How can people walk along the beach? Are they to go up and over the geotubes and down the other side? I mean, the whole issue of public access, I haven't seen addressed in any of the information that's been submitted. So I would hope that you would just focus in on the beach and public access.
What happens with the town-owned public beach if the erosion continues, if nothing is done, and the erosion continues as it has? The town-owned land continues to move?
I think so, and I think that that's a real concern. And one of...
We're going to private property.
No. I mean, the town-owned beach will erode away. It will erode away.
If nothing is done.
Exactly. So my understanding, and Mr. Cohen can comment on this, is that in the license, I believe it's in the license, the town has asked for the property owners to negotiate one big beach easements with the town. So if the town land does erode away, the public will still have access on the beach below the bluff for what's ever left there. This seems like a good opportunity to do that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually got a draft from the town today.
Well, that's good, because at the public information session last week, we asked about this and nothing had been done about it. So I'm glad to hear that something's moving forward on it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think we'll continue this, and then we'll pick this up when we have a plan.
Could we continue this to April 30th?
April 30th.
That's not our next meeting, but the following meeting. So it's 4 weeks.
Okay. Unless I hear an objection from the commission, we'll continue to the 30th. Okay, no objections, so we'll do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. One down. then we go.
That's the long one. That's the long one.
Yeah, that takes us to the land bank at 260 Milestone Road.
Chairman, I just want to check, the enforcement leader on the agenda is also continued.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You want to pause a second? Tell this room to shut up?
If we could, if everyone could, if you're going to be leaving, leave as quickly and quietly as you can so we can carry on. Thank you.
There's an larger man here. Who's that?
Yes. Oh, I get it. That's all right. I need a minute too because I got to switch pins from Wisconsin's pin to everyone else's pin. Yes, I did say that. That's one good soul that got. Oh, it's just for this property. I got another one for the rest of them. At last count, I think I have 11 banker boxes full of paper from Wisconsin Beach over the years.
Is that the 60,000 pages that you had copied?
Yeah, I'm still working on it. Because I have nothing else to do.
Art, you coming up?
Oh, yeah, I didn't know you were leaving. Sorry. Come on, Art. I thought someone else was. Yep.
Sorry, I didn't get your plans out either.
Ready to go right ahead?
Yep, go ahead.
For the applicant, I'm Casparo, Blackmore Associates. I'm before you tonight with for the second hearing for the notice of intent application out at the old Skinner's Golf Course, now known as Wisconsin Golf. And what we did was we had a discussion last time concerning some of the watering protocols, the irrigation system location, and we've submitted additional information that I hope was in your packet, where the superintendent or assistant superintendent of the golf course is a superintendent, excuse me, put together exactly how they're proposing to do this, how much water will be used, and I don't know if you want me to take the time to go through this, if you've already done it, or you want to just address questions on it. It wasn't prepared by me, but I think that it went to address, I believe, the concerns with respect to that the water use is going to be controlled and managed, and answering the questions with respect to the season, draining, no freezing, and also I think to reiterate that this is a long-standing practice of watering when needed in the summer, as I understand it, by dragging sprinklers and hoses, and that's what this is essentially meant to replace. We have received sign-off from Natural Heritage as well as a file number on this, so we would hope to close the matter tonight, so they're hoping to put it in unless there are outstanding questions or concerns.
Anything from the commission? No. Okay. Anything from the public on the land? Oh, Sarah?
She said no.
Oh, no. Okay. Anything from the public? Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce Perry.
Bruce, could you come forward for
Speak in the mic.
the mic for Sarah, please?
You got to use your outside voice.
Bruce Perry, speaking as a citizen at this moment. In the notice of intent, there is no project narrative, construction narrative that I could find. Addressing there's 2 ditch crossings on the Wisconsin Trust property that they're starting on, and to get the water line in there. And also this work is inches away from wetland boundaries. Again, usually requires some sort of protocol, and I couldn't find that in the file. Secondly, I reviewed the letter from Sean Oberly, and I guess my question is the water quantities that he's proposing to use, how do those reflect the existing quantities that are being used? Is it substantially more, substantially less? He's talking 8,000 or 9,000 gallons a night when they turn on all the sprinklers, rotate through. And the well is close to all the wetlands, and so I'd be concerned about any sort of drawdown of the water and the wetland edges, and not addressed. And then as they improve the grasses on the tees and greens, I have some concerns about how they're going to be managed. Are they going to increase the use of herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, to maintain the greenness of the tees and greens. Again, the previous management was fairly low-key and limited, and I'm concerned that, especially the greens that are close to the wetlands, that additional applications of nutrients are going to be added to it. If I'm not mistaken, it is in a Zone 2 area for the Sconset well field, so there should be some concerns about nutrients getting into the groundwater, and at some point, even though it may be minimal, getting into the Sconset water supply. So, I guess that's it for now.
Thank you. Have you told me that was speaking?
That was Bruce Perry.
Okay.
Speaking on behalf of Bruce Perry.
Right. Appreciate it.
If I may just respond to the portion of the narrative, what I did was just to put it into the regular narrative part where I had enough room. I felt in describing that it was a ditch witch type of a project, and then on the main line coming in, that it would be open trench and filled on the same day, so we wouldn't be leaving any chance for spoils to sort of be washing in, or eroding into the wetland areas, that it would be a one-day kind of put it back together within the existing dirt road. So that was sort of it was a more of a keep it simple approach, if you will. But I could give you more information if you felt that you needed it in terms of protection of the resource areas. The way that we looked at it was that it was essentially putting in a single pipe through a road that's been there for a long time and filling it back in, and not too much more than that. With respect to the ditch crossing again, I think you're talking about where the road just goes over the ditch and doesn't have any actual culvert, and the water just runs across the traveled way. To the extent that I am familiar with it, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm just not clear what he means by the ditch.
Yeah, Bruce, where's the ditch?
Bruce, again, there is some places where the road goes on top of the ditches on the Sconset Trust property. So, if you're going to just excavate across the ditch, now you're going to create a weak point or break the culvert. If you're going to do directional drilling underneath the ditch and back up again, we need to know that. So how are they crossing the actual ditch that has a culvert in it?
We would just put it back together, open trenching, put it right back together, whatever we had to. I'm not proposing directional drilling. So, and most likely the way that it would be done is you would excavate, if there's a culvert there, you excavate on both sides, you leave the culvert, and you put your pipe underneath, you haunch that pipe. I don't know that, in terms of, the integrity of that culvert, we're not going to, they'd only create their own problem if they broke the culvert and left it there. So, again, if you feel that you need more detail for that. But
can that be dealt with in a condition? So that we can give you more?
Certainly you could condition that if a culvert is damaged during construction, that it would require replacement in kind. You could certainly condition that to read that way.
Go ahead. Why don't we handle, I want to get to both pieces of Bruce's comments, so maybe we should just stick to the culvert and the trenching first, if there are anything else on that.
The rest of it, when you say ditch witch, you're talking about a vibratory plow?
Yeah, essentially a pipe, not even that. In a lot of cases, it'll be a pipe puller with the irrigation, the one that actually spools out and you just leave sort of the mole trail. Exactly. So now that's not the case for the main supply line. The main supply line would be used, most likely with a mini excavator to put in, probably a 2 to a 6 inch line, depending on what they determine they're gonna run in there. I don't know what size pipe they're gonna put in. But this purpose of that pipe is to serve the clubhouse and not the irrigation system. And then, secondly, with respect, and again, that's within the dirt road. So I didn't mean, that's why I didn't take it as, we weren't going out in any other non-disturbed areas. And then with respect to turf management and water use, I don't have those numbers. I have no idea how I would get you that information. I mean, I want to respond to concerns, but if there's something that I just feel like we're never going to be able to come up with what kind of a number they used to use. So So we're trying to take an approach that they're going to have greater control over the water that's used now. In terms of turf management, that's not part of this application. I don't have any information on that. Obviously, you know, under the new management with the land bank, you know, they're likely to put more resources into, you know, maintaining the system than probably previously existed over the last 100 years or whatnot. But I don't know exactly how to. If you, I suppose a condition that could be imposed would be to say, per the best management practices of, you know, that have been adopted by the town of Nantucket as related to golf courses. But again, I would say it's, you know, not really what I'm.
Just to clarify that, they actually are required already through Board of Health regulations to conform to the BMP. And they're actually, their land manager there and their crew is required to be licensed by the town of Nantucket to apply any fertilizers to that site. And they have to do it in accordance with both the rules of the Board of Health and the Article 68 BMP. And that's independent of, I know we've also adopted the BMP into our regulations, so they're forced to use the BMP for any fertilizers regardless of any condition that we put on.
So we could certainly have a component for monitoring, to monitor how much water they actually use. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
You could, I think that would be reasonable to say, if that would, maybe that would help address, you know, Bruce's concern, or at least get some data out there that I don't see why they couldn't put a meter on and give you an annual report or a seasonal, after each seasonal probably, what was the total volume used.
Yeah. Well, you could certainly ask that for any of the herbicides, pesticides, or, I mean, we've always asked for fertilizer reports and things, so you could certainly condition those monitoring controls as well.
You sort of hope with properly managed lands, the grass and stuff is healthier and requires less treatment of, you know, the pests aren't as likely to get in there if you're properly managing it. So, you know, that may be a bit overly hopeful, but it's kind of the word that came out of the building the BMP. So anything else? Okay. You ready to close this?
Move to close.
Second.
Okay, we got to do a.
That's right. Sarah?
Sarah?
Yes, I say yes to close.
Okay.
Golding, yes.
Steinauer, yes.
Bennett, yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay, so that motion carries unanimously. And with Jim refused, yes.
I forgot how much fun the roll call vote really is.
Okay, that takes us to Pippin's Way LLC, 12 Gardner Road.
So we give you the correct plans. Nope, I think that's the old one. There's revised, first.
Mr. Harris, Chairman, I'm the guest for the applicant. I'm before you tonight for the second public hearing related to work proposed at what's known as Lots 7 and 9 as part of the Pippin's Way, or actually it was Pippin's Way subdivision, and that had been previously approved. There's a long history here that I believe you're familiar with, but what we're in front of you tonight is related only to lots number 7 and 9, and that had to do with the construction of a new driveway, removal of a structure, establishment of building envelopes partially within the buffer zone. And after the last hearing, we were waiting for sign-off from Natural Heritage, and we also provided a revised plan that shifted the proposed well locations from within the proposed conservation restricted area to outside of it, still within your jurisdiction, but the actual subject matter that we described last time has not changed. We did receive today sign-off from Natural Heritage and have received a file number. So I believe that there weren't outstanding questions or concerns at the last hearing. If there are additional questions or concerns, we'd be happy to try to address those.
Anything from the commission?
This was just really continued for natural heritage, wasn't it?
Right.
Correct.
And I wanted to go over the revised plan.
And the revised well locations.
Anything from the public on Hickman's Way? Okay. Do I have a motion to close?
Second.
Okay, let's go through the vote. Sarah?
Mr. Cologne?
Jen?
Aye.
Mike, or Ian, sorry?
Aye.
Ernie? Aye.
Andy? Aye.
Mike? Aye. Okay, that motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, that takes us to Ellison Moore Beatles Realty Trust, 7 Chase Lane.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this was the same situation where we were waiting on natural heritage. The project was really, I don't think there was any other questions or concerns at the last hearing. It's a buffer zone project without waivers, and to do some landscaping. This was the one to change the driveway that comes in from Chase Lane to come in from Pulpus Road, and we did receive sign-off from Natural Heritage.
Okay. Any questions? Anything from the public? Okay. I think we're ready to close this. Jeff, do we have everything we need to close this one too?
Yes, sir.
Move to close.
Second?
Okay, Sarah?
Ready to close?
Yes.
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 Okay. Jen?
Yes.
Ian?
Yes.
Ernie? Yes. Andy?
Yes.
Mike?
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Okay, Andrews, 190 Nantucket Road. I don't see a file number on this one
No. And we also need Natural Heritage, so we will have to continue this, but I would like to present it to you in case there's additional information that you may want to have from us. For the applicant, Art Gasparo, Blackmore Associates, and J.J. Andrews, the owner applicant, is also here with us tonight. We're before you with a project for the only proposed work is related to the upgrade of an existing failed septic system. And the work is proposed within the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland as well as coastal bank by definition for due to the slope in the intersection of the flood zone. So what we've shown on the plan here is the most restrictive resource area is in fact the top of the coastal bank. We've shown the 25, 50, and 100-foot buffer zones. Right now, the existing failed system is entirely within the 25-foot buffer zone. We're proposing a new leach bed, which is completely outside of the buffer zone. So we have a clear net benefit improvement type of a project going on here. We're increasing both the horizontal separation distance significantly to the order of close to 100 feet. And then we're also increasing the vertical separation distance by at least, I would say, at least 10 feet from where the bottom is now to where we're going. We'll be providing a minimum 5-foot groundwater separation distance, and we're pumping up. We're not including an alternative technology component to the system because the leach is actually outside of the buffer zone in your jurisdiction. But what we are doing is to add a new septic tank, which is shown right here, which will have a pump chamber in it, and then we'll deliver the clarified effluent up to the proposed leach bed. And finally, we have a well that is also proposed within your jurisdiction, and the purpose of the well is to provide separation, minimum 100-foot separation distance to the proposed leach bed. With that, we'd be happy to take, I would like to address, we did receive a field inspection report, and I do owe you a waiver for work to fill the cesspool is within 25 feet. So that is something I'll provide to you for the next meeting, since we need to continue anyway. I will base that waiver under the provision of long-term net benefit, and I showed the silt fence going around there. Again, it's work within the 25, so we need a waiver to allow that to occur.
You'll crush that and...
Yeah, what we'll do is just to crush the top of it and then just fill it in with compacted sand. Essentially, I see we're going to have an excavator staged right here is to dig and set that tank. So that's all within the same disturbance area. So we'll just have them take care of it. I just don't want to have any... The Title V requires that we fill them in. There's a further provision under septic tanks requiring the crushing of the bottom of them. We don't know what this is. I didn't want to go. It's failed. Looking around, whatever it is, but it's on the. It's going to be on the plan that the installer bids on, and be a requirement that they have to. Should there be anything in it, chances are it's empty. But should there be anything in it, it would be pumped by a licensed waste hauler the same way a tank would be pumped. Should there be any bottom to it, it would be punctured with the teeth of the excavator, and then it would just be compacted with sand. Disturbed areas to be just seeded.
Any questions from the commission? Go ahead, Sarah.
No, I'm not. I was just, I don't have any.
Oh, okay. Anything from the public on Andrews? Okay. Looks like people are pretty happy with the designs, so I guess we need to continue this for, 2 weeks?
2 weeks, if we could, please.
Unless I hear an objection, we'll continue this until the 16th. Okay, we'll continue with that.
Thank you.
Crowder, 191 Old Point Road.
Both Sarah and I are requesting this.
Can we switch to Oak Hill, because Kevin Gale got to take a roll call and see for this one.
Is that all right with you guys?
Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, so we'll go to 12 Oak Hollow. Nominee Trust of 12 Oak Hollow Lane.
Okay, for the record, Don Bracken of Bracken Engineering. This is a filing under the local bylaw for an isolated vegetated wetland area. Now, it's an existing vacant lot proposed to construct a single-family dwelling cottage and driveway off of Oak Hollow Lane. David Haynes flagged the wetland area. We did recently update the plans because a couple of the wetland flags were adjusted in the field by David and Laurenti. Flags moved about 3 or 4 feet. So the original plan has been revised, and the silt fence has moved about 3 or 4 feet from what we had added. The proposed work includes no work within the 25-foot buffer zone, a portion of the pervious driveway within the 50-foot buffer zone, and a portion of the proposed cottage within the 100-foot buffer zone of the isolated vegetated wetland. We are proposing a couple of small depressions on the north side of the driveway, at the low points in the driveway, to make sure that it doesn't puddle in the driveway and also doesn't create a direct ravine and discharge toward the wetland area. The grades are relatively flat in this vicinity as it is, and we're not changing any of the existing grades. We're also proposing within the limits of the driveway to put in the sewer force main to connect to the town sewer that's further up the street to the north. Off to the edge of the driveway, away from the wetland, will be an underground electric line.
So is this on town water too then?
No, it's not on town water. We are proposing a well in the back of the site. They do have, at this point, that's what they're proposing. It's about 800 feet, I think, to bring water down, and look at the cost of that. And right now, they're planning on putting in as well. If they decide for the town water, we have to come back for modification.
Any landscaping proposed?
Just nothing specific on this plan, just loam and seed, any of the disturbed areas. We did do the calculation of the disturbed area between the 25 and 50-foot buffer, and we are below the 50%.
Any idea of how deep the well is going to be?
Groundwater, we did a test pit to determine groundwater. It's about elevation 23, so it looks like groundwater is only about 9-10 feet maybe from where the well is going to go, but my guess is they probably put in a 50-foot well with a submersible pump.
Anything else from the commission? Anything from the public? Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes.
Close.
Second?
Okay, Sarah?
Excellent.
So Jen?
Yes.
Ian, yes.
Ernie, yes. Andy?
Yes.
Mike? Okay, so that closes, that motion carries unanimously. Are we still waiting for David?
Nope, Kevin is here now.
Oh, Kevin, okay. So now we go back to Crowder at 191 Eel Point Road.
Okay, for the record again, John Bracken, Bracken Engineering, with Kevin Dale, attorney for the applicant. Probably recall this project, we filed an RDA that delineated the resource areas back in December. Our resource areas are the same as were shown on the application plan, with the exception of the BVW area at the intersection of the roads at Eel Point Road. On the RDA, we showed an approximate BVW. Since then, we had Brian Madden of LEC flag the wetland, and we've located it. We don't propose any work within 100 feet of that BVW. The site has several resource areas. The resource areas that affect the project are coastal dune, coastal bank, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. As you can see, there's an existing house on the site shown in shaded in gray. The majority of the house is within the 100-foot buffer of the coastal bank. We're proposing to remove that house and construct a new house with new site planning, septic, driveway, and so forth. I've highlighted the new house location. You can see the majority of the proposed foundation is outside the 100-foot buffer to the coastal bank. It touches the land subject to coastal storm flowage. On the north side, in that portion of the structure that's shaded, will actually be a crawl space. We are proposing a built-in pool with hardscaping between the 50-foot and the 100-foot buffer. We're not going any further beyond the existing lawn area that's there. Proposing a sill fence at the limit of work and at the base of the grading. Other work proposed within the 100-foot buffer include our retaining walls that vary between 2 and 3 feet, and grading around the swimming pool and a fire pit. But all structures will be outside the 50-foot buffer. We're also proposing dry wells for all the roof runoff that is shown on the plan.
What about a pool fence?
Pool, yeah, well, we haven't shown the fence, but I mean, something we can add. We haven't been given that detail from the landscape architect, but I assume it will be outside the 50-foot buffer.
Okay.
It could be conditioned that way.
We'd like to condition that, then, to be outside the 50.
Well, and also protocols for emptying it and the like.
Yeah, that's pretty standard for us to not discharge that into an area of our jurisdiction.
Okay.
We are waiting for natural heritage, so
No.
we do have an SCD.
Yes.
Okay, are there any other questions from the commission? Anything from the public on Crowder? Okay, see not, so we...
Well, real quickly, I just want to get this on the record. We did get a comment from an abutter that relates to a driveway easement, but the letter they submitted, all of their concerns, to be frank, have really nothing to do with the Wetlands Protection Act. It's more of an individual matter. So I just want to get on the record that we did receive it. It's what I sent to you guys today, that we had acknowledged it.
Hey, Don, you want to continue to the 16th?
Yes, that's fine.
Unless I heard an objection, we'll continue to the 16th. Okay, since there are no objections, we'll continue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're down to McKenzie and Hughes trustees at 4 Swain Street.
Just to throw onto the record real quick, this is where we did conduct a field viewing on Monday.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos, representing the applicant, Charles and Elizabeth Phillips. The project is located at 4 Swain Street within the Brant Point section of the island. The regulated areas on the site are land subject to coastal storm flowage, which the site is entirely within. The structure itself is elevated and is in compliance with the flood hazard requirements. Approximate flood zone for this area, I think, is elevation 8. First floor of the site is elevated at about 9.4, and that was done since the time the original structure was constructed. There also is a isolated wetland along the back side of the property. For those of you at the site visit, we did view that. It's a low pocket area, essentially, that's been filled around in the Brant Point section area. It is an isolated area that's been the subject of a wetland filing for this project when the building was elevated, and also the abutting property to the east, in which a garage and home work was done within that area fairly recently. I did note that wetland order number on the particular plan. The property recently has changed hands. The new owner would like to construct an 8 by 10 or 80 square foot shed on the property. Currently, the site is limited with regard to any type of storage. There's not a basement in the existing structure. So what we're proposed, the preferred location is what I've labeled on the plan as Site 1, which is the 8 by 10 shed, 11 feet off the back side of the deck. It does, however, it is outside the 25-foot setback, but it is, however, within the 50-foot setback. And we have also located a Site 2, which is an alternate shed location, which is located to the east of the existing deck. Again, outside the 25, but still within the 50. Both of those sites occur within existing developed lawn area. We did receive comments back from Laurentide with regard to the wetland line itself and the nature of the site with regard to the lawn. And David Haynes did provide a response to that. We did file that with the commission with regard to our location or depiction of the wetland lines on the site. We have asked for a waiver for the project, as we are proposing construction within the 50. The waiver is under the premise that no reasonable conditions or alternatives would allow the project to proceed in compliance with the regulations. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have. We did receive our DEP file number, I think yesterday also. And the site is not subject to NHESP or any type of National Heritage mapping.
Any questions from the commission? Okay, anything from the public? Okay, Sarah?
I was just going to say, I do kind of prefer that second location because it's further from the wetland, but I don't know how the rest of y'all feel.
I agree with that.
Well, is it really going to make any difference to to any future incursion that might take place on the wetlands? In other words, if the owners would rather have it in one place rather than the other, is it really going to affect our jurisdiction at all? Our responsibilities? I'm sorry, I'm being a little hesitant in phrasing that. Do they have a preference?
Well, their preference is the site 1.
Yeah.
That's what it was, his initial preference. I mean, quite honestly, I think he'd like to, he may get out there, and once he's, he just recently purchased the property. Once he gets out there and kind of gets a feel for it, he may end up putting it in the second site. I think that's really what the intent was, to have him have an option either way. But his initial preference was the site. That first site.
The second site seems a lot more sort of out of the way and not interfering with the property use so much, and I guess that's not my concern.
Yeah, in terms of the things that we should be concerned with, that's it.
I don't think it makes any difference, does it?
It depends on what you store in the shed. I mean, if you've got a ice tractor, fertilizer, things like that, where they were going to put it in directly in position number 1 was there's a bit of a slope down into the wetland, and it's 30 feet closer, so I mean that's significant. It's just easier if there was any kind of leak that we'd be concerned about. It would be easier for it to get into the wetland in spot 1 than in spot 2. We didn't want to make it or break it, but that was the reason. I wasn't being arbitrary. I could see higher potentialities for adverse impacts in the first site.
Well, perhaps we
Well,
can condition it in such a way.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have, I mean, if you conditioned it, I mean, I think it's an 8 by 10, it's a smaller shed. I think what the intent there is bicycles, surfboards,
Right.
yard equipment. I mean, that's really what they're, but even with the 8 by 10, it's a smaller shed than typically you'd see.
Right.
You know, than that standard 10 by 20, which is the 120, which is the smallest one. He's just trying to, you know.
So we take your point, Sarah, and wonder whether we can condition it in such a way that your concerns can be alleviated.
I'm sure it's not a huge issue. I just try to put them further from the wetland and farther from slopes that lead directly. So, but you know, it's not really changing things.
Well, and I guess sort of as a general way I look at things, if the applicants are willing to move things farther away from the wetlands, especially if they're within the 50-foot no build, then the further they are, the better, is a general principle.
Exactly. It actually makes more sense once you see the lot too, which is what Paul was referring to.
Anything from the public? Okay. So, do we have everything we need to close this one, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion to close?
Move to close.
Second.
Okay, Sarah?
Yes, okay to close.
Jen?
Yes.
Ian?
Yes.
Ernie, yes. Andy?
Yes.
Mike?
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mass Department of Transportation, 4 Goose Pond Lane. I don't see a file number on this one.
We have one.
Oh, you do? Okay.
For the record, I'm Lisa Stanley with VHB representing SDOT, and we did just... Lisa Stanley.
Stanley?
Stanley.
Thank you.
We did receive a file number this afternoon. It's
Okay.
2660. So the project that we have in front of you is to construct a multi-use bicycle path that connects Washington Street Extension with Orange Street. It's called the In-Town Bike Path, and the purpose of this bike path is to give bicycle riders heading from downtown Nantucket outwards to the town system of bicycle trails a much safer way to get there than to go around Orange Street where there are no facilities for bicycles. So this would start at Washington Street Extension on the north, and then take an abandoned railroad berm that crosses the marsh to Goose Pond Lane, and then come out onto Orange Street. And the reason that this is in front of you is that the railroad berm itself was constructed years ago across Salt Marsh, and it separates 2 wetland systems. This is starting from the Washington Street side, that to the west is Goose Pond, which is both a water body and has bordering vegetated wetlands, largely dominated by Phragmites. And to the east, it's all salt marsh. And the berm itself, because of its elevation and its proximity, is both buffer zone to both resources. It functions as coastal bank, and it's within land subject to coastal storm flowage. So we have multiple resources in this area.
May I interrupt? I apologize, but I'm on the BPAC, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Should I recuse myself?
If you feel you're in conflict, but if you think you can look at this objectively, then no.
Okay. Well, just having stated that for the record.
Thank you. The proposed bicycle path will be 10 feet wide with 2 feet grass shoulders on either side, which is our typical bike path standard for Nantucket. And because of the narrowness of this berm, the objective is to fit the bike path on there to provide a safe passage for bicycle users, walkers, etc., is to use sheet piling to construct it across the berm. The berm itself at the top is not 14 feet wide. It's close, but it's not quite 14 feet. So to get that 14 feet of elevation, the proposal is to drive steel sheeting pretty much the length of the berm on either side to provide that upright retaining wall, fill behind it.
And then fill it.
And then fill behind it,
Okay.
so we'll then have
Okay.
the bike path on top. We've got some typical cross-sections that show how that would work. This is the cross-section for most of the berm, and the berm itself is actually about 650 feet long. So most of that this would be filled, this is the existing slope. You'd add the sheet piling on both sides and then construct the path across the top, 10 feet paved, 2 feet grass shoulder on either side, and then rail fence on either side of that to keep people from falling off.
I was going to say, you got a pretty good vertical drop there.
Yes, rail fence is absolutely required because of that steep drop off. As you get closer to each end, the ground flattens out quite a bit, so that we go transition from sheet piling on one side to simply a graded slope on either side. As you get close to the end, and the grades flatten out. So that's our typical sections.
How far down is that sheet piling going to be driven?
Good question. The sheet piling comes in 8-foot sections. So it would be 2 to 3 feet above grade and 5 to 6 feet below grade for stability. That in the middle of this berm, by grading, in the center of this berm there is a mostly failed culvert that connects Goose Pond to the salt marshes. That culvert is pretty much collapsed. The town does have long-term plans to replace that culvert, but those plans have not yet developed. We'd actually hoped that we could do these two projects in conjunction, but the culvert plans are not ready to actually implement because they would include a couple of things like dredging Goose Pond, which Bruce knows about. So at this point, we're not proposing to do that. And the slight complication in our plans is that we haven't yet designed the wall structure that will span that culvert. We can't drive sheeting because that would completely block the culvert. So we're going to drive the sheeting up to the culvert and then construct a short wall across there that would preserve the integrity of the culvert for the time being. Also, as part of this bike path, about in the center, there's a fairly large flat area that would become a rest area. There's a similar rest area in the Hummock Pond bike path, and this would have a bike rack, benches, would let people look out over the salt marsh, and that's in an area of upland. We would be planting at least one black oak tree in that location. There are some trees along the berm, and the project would require that 4 trees be removed. And that we were proposing to replace those with 4 black oaks. The trees to be removed are largely the invasive rock maple. I think there's 1 black cherry as part of that. And at the south end of Goose Pond Lane, there is a very large multi-trunk flat willow. And the proposal there is to retain that willow, but remove the trees that currently arch over the path. Because currently, even if you're on foot, you have to duck underneath those. We're not planning to change the elevation of the top of the berm, so the elevation stays the same. It doesn't change its flood control functions. At Goose Pond Lane, Goose Pond is currently gravel, and actually somebody wrote it that the proposal is there to pave 75 feet of Goose Pond Lane at a 12-foot width. And that would take us out to Orange Street. And there is a little bit of work in Orange Street that would be within the wetland buffer zone to add shoulders. So in Orange Street would be adding a paved shoulder on each side to accommodate bike riders.
That's a new concept for out here.
There's no way, we don't really want to take people from this protected facility and dump them on Orange Street. There are going to be 4-foot shoulders for a short distance.
Right.
Concentrated. It'll be very concentrated.
So Goose Pond Lane, will that still be open to vehicle traffic then?
Yes,
Or? Oh, okay.
yes, because there are residences up here,
Mhm.
so it's the access to those residences. So the access to the residence stays open, but we are proposing to pave that so that it's a stable surface. The pull-out here, the viewing area, will not be paved. It's going to have a sand, gravel and sand underlay, and with concrete pavers set in that, so it will be pervious.
Are you worried about, well, I'm a bicyclist, as I mentioned, and I'd be tempted to stop there and go down into the wetlands, so go exploring. So is that going to be an issue?
I think not. There's actually quite a dense stand of Phragmites in that location. So the views of the salt marsh are somewhat limited by the Phragmites that occupies that. There have been some invasive species removal efforts out here, but the frag is right there. But we have actually dealt with that issue on other bike paths that we've done. We did the Shining Sea bike path recently in Falmouth, and that was a real concern of the residents that this would invite people to head out into the salt marsh. So we found that we put up some warning signs. They're asking people to protect the salt marsh, to stay on the pavement, to not venture off. We found that the warning signs about ticks in the salt marsh are perhaps the most effective barrier to keeping people on the pavement.
Yeah, ticks and poison ivy are our friends.
We should plant them. So in summary, that's the project. It's a fairly straightforward bike path construction project. It's unusual in being in such a visible and sensitive location. So we're hoping that with the sheet piling that we can actually do the construction without any impact to either salt marsh or bordering vegetated wetland, and preserve the stability of the coastal bank and improve safety for bike users.
I assume there's a correlation between sheet thickness and longevity. Are you going with, are you factoring that in at all?
I'll have to talk to Matt Hayes, who's our project engineer.
We are currently starting a boring program to sample the soils out there. Once we have that information, our structural engineers will design the sheet piling for the exposed height, and they'll make a recommendation as to the gauge of the ocean.
The application mentions country drainage out here, but I'm curious as to how the drainage will actually work with the sheet piling in place. I can't imagine that the water could then move into the wetlands the way it has been
It essentially
currently.
flows over the top. The way that the grading goes, it will actually be able to flow over the top of the sheet piling.
Oh, so the grading is going to come up to the sheet piling.
It's going to be crowned a bit, yes.
Okay. And was there any investigation into actually using pervious material for the bike path instead of paving over here? I mean, we mentioned that it's crossing two wetlands, but really it's an area that's dividing one wetland into two separate places. And, as it stands now, you're getting infiltration through that old railroad bed of water down through the soil and then out into the wetland instead of flowing straight into the wetland and pulling anything that might be sitting on the surface with it. As it stands with the paving, anything that is on the surface will then get pulled straight into the wetland instead of having that infiltration chance.
Mass DOT.
Sorry,
Go ahead, Matt.
Matt, go ahead.
Could you come up to the microphone so that Sarah can hear you? Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no, I just said that was very well said, and that's a big concern of mine. You can't really order it appropriately. My concern is how much water is infiltrating through the railroad bed. I'm a big fan of this bike path, and I know we need one, but the design here is going to be more critical than almost anywhere else on Nantucket. My concern, too, was why were they using asphalt? And in the stormwater plan, which basically said we don't need a plan because there's going to be no pollution, I understand there's no vehicles going on it, but asphalt alone does shed PAHs and VOCs and other pollutants when rainwater sheets off of it. So I wouldn't say that that's no pollution. There's not going to be pollution from people's vehicles so much, but I think both of those points that Jim makes, I'm concerned about the sheet piling stopping the hydrology that's occurring now, and I'm curious as to why a pervious surface wasn't considered or proposed or would be considered.
First, I'm going to let Matt answer some of that, but we do have 2 feet of shoulder, of pervious shoulder on either side of the pavement, which will allow some infiltration. We can't really compromise the sheet piling, I think, by perforating that, but we will get infiltration down below that into the groundwater table through the sheet piling. This is not a large area of impervious. It's about 6,500 square feet of new pavement on this berm, and it's a quite small percentage of the total watershed area. What we're talking about here is, Goose Pond receives stormwater drainage from much of the town, So there's an enormous water supply that flows into Goose Pond. The salt marsh on the other side has adequate hydrology. This narrow strip, I don't think, is a significant contributor to the hydrology of either Goose Pond or the adjacent salt marsh. So in terms of recharge, I don't see recharge of surface water as being a significant issue here. But Matt can talk to pervious pavement. This is a Mass DOT project, and we are having to look at what Mass DOT's standards and preferences are.
Right. We did at the beginning look at pervious pavement. Mass DOT doesn't generally like to have pervious pavement on bike paths that they build for maintenance and mobility issues. It's not the easiest to maintain. Obviously, you need to have an ongoing maintenance of that material to keep it pervious. So almost up to now, Mass DOT has discouraged pervious pavements for bike paths. Currently out there, there are areas of pavement along this portion of the walking trail.
You can argue that's pervious pavement. So I'll restate what Matt said too, to say that MassDOT prefers not to do pervious pavement because of the maintenance issues. But we have certainly done bike paths on Nantucket using pervious pavement as town projects. And if the commission were to continue to condition it for pervious, I think MassDOT would be willing to accept that.
And who would maintain it?
Long-term maintenance would be the town.
Is there other alternative materials like cement, concrete, as opposed to if you're worried about the EOC runoff?
Well, the pervious pavement that we've used is actually a really coarse material. We used it on the Yield Point bike path, particularly on the dunes portion of it, and it's a much coarser grain. It is asphalt, but it has a coarse grain so that it is actually much more pervious.
Without water flow through.
So I guess I biked over it without realizing.
Yeah, without knowing that you were impervious.
Yeah, some of the other pervious materials that people have suggested are things like stone dust, gravels and stone dust, which really don't work well for a bicycle facility. They tend to rut. They're really not easy to maintain. You have to grade them out all the time. So we prefer to see a good solid surface in there, and the asphalt or pervious asphalt mix is really nice.
Well, and the bicycle wheels are getting so narrow.
Mass DOT's main concern is ADA compliance, and many of the gravel types of surfaces will not hold up and maintain that strict 1.5% cross slope required for ADA.
I think it'd be worth sort of getting to the relative area of the shoulders, and with the crowning and the 2-foot shoulders on either side. I have no idea how you figure out what's an adequate amount, but in other words, if that's going to take it, and well, I think we heard earlier that the drainage is going to go over the top, so it's either going to go over the top or it's going to percolate down through, or some combination. But if it's going to percolate down through, then we're there. Seems to me. And then
It's not going to run down the bike path and run off.
Right, it's not a huge area, not a parking lot.
If I may, don't want to put words in my mouth, I think what you talked about is that the sheet steel may be higher than the slope of the 2 foot, so that water comes off the bike path across the 2 feet is stopped by a 6 or 8 inch berm at the edge of the sheet steel, and then can percolate straight down. Is that?
I'm just trying to understand what's being proposed here,
right?
And how it would work, because whether it works, if that would work, that's one thing. If that wouldn't work, then who pays for it is not typically our concern about what we need to do. We need to figure out the thing that works.
Right, and the sheet piling at the end, as you can see in our cross sections, would not be sticking up 6 or 8 inches, but would be, cut essentially flush with the smooth soil surface. We don't really want that sort of exposed.
Right, and so how do we reconcile all those? Is the drainage going over the top and directly in, or is it percolating through the 2 foot?
It's going to do both. It's honestly going to do both.
And how much is going to do which?
And
it's 22 cubic yards. That was another journey.
It's really impossible to calculate that, because on a per storm basis, the net effect is that all of the runoff that falls in this berm currently is going into the surface or groundwater right in the same location.
It's really a minor, apart from the worries of contamination. It's really not.
How pervious is that berm anyway? I mean, I would think it's probably pretty darn packed.
I think the soils under there are extremely interesting.
We're
Done a few
looking forward
pits
to
in
getting,
it.
we're looking forward to seeing the
Highway
works.
bodies.
There is a sewer line in here too. That there is a large sewer line that runs inside this berm as well.
It exists right now?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Gonna make the culvert.
It's not a,
A sewer line.
That runs through the berm.
Through the berm?
Yes.
There are now existing sewer manholes that will be in the pavement.
Oh.
well, we ready to go to the public on this? Cormac?
I didn't know if you wanted technical comments before.
Yeah, let's go to,
Oh.
okay, Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a chance Monday to look at the file briefly. The plans themselves were affected by the blizzard in that they were a sodden mass on the office floor. So I didn't get a chance to look at the plans, but a couple of quick comments, and since they have to come back anyway. It would be nice to field stake where this sheet pile is going, so the commission has some idea how long and where it's going to be. A recent wetland boundary flagged would also be helpful to see how close it is. I know it's going to be certainly within 25 feet of the wetland boundary. The turnout where the sitting area is, it'd be nice to know where that goes because it does drop off on both sides, and even in that middle area it drops off fairly quickly, so you may end up with a drop off outside the sitting area that's going to require a fence anyway, which is going to be in the middle of the review kind of thing. So those kind of issues. The length of the sheet pile is important in that it has to be long enough to get past the compacted berm material into the muck that's underneath it, and then also not bend out. You're going to provide a hydraulic obstruction to whatever water is flowing through there. On the one side, it might be a benefit that less water is flowing out of Goose Pond into the salt marsh, because we all know what Goose Pond is full of. On the other hand, it's still altering the hydrology of that berm and the salt marsh on the other side. So it'd be good to see where that is located. The country-style flow, I'm a little concerned that a 2-foot separation then overflowing the sheet pile on a frozen day, right, ground's frozen, or even on a heavy storm, you're going to get whatever washes off that pavement's going to go right into the pond and into the salt marsh. So I think some sort of treatment should be tried. You have the space either under the bike path, or just some alternatives, because let's see what can or cannot be done to collect it and use either end, which has a wider berm than through the middle, which is narrow. And I think that's about it. And the culverts are concerned. It would be nice if they could replace the culverts while they're doing this project. It would make everybody happy. I don't know where the town sits on the design of those, but I think you can replace the culverts without dredging Goose Pond.
We've looked at to respond to Bruce.
Yes.
We've looked at the culverts. The town has had a big, long-term study about those culverts,
Right.
and the questions really are, what's the function of the culvert? How deep does it have to be? How large does it have to be? If you improve, and one of the goals of replacing the culvert would actually be to improve the flushing of Goose Pond, to restore some of its old salt marsh hydrology, to get rid of the frag, to improve the water quality. If you improve that flushing, are you going to start flushing sediments out of Goose Pond? And it's an enormously complex issue that is not being tackled as part of our project.
Gotcha. So, do you have any insights as to the topography underneath the actual, the core samples or anything?
We're going to have sediment samples done in the next week.
There are stakes out there right now showing the location of those cores.
And where the viewing is, that already exists?
Yes.
Right. So
In the future, if things do go ahead with figuring out shifting the hydrology that's connecting these two areas, how easy would it be if, I'm assuming whatever plan would come up to work culverts would either be larger culverts or more than one culvert to deal with that area. How easy would it be to put those in through the sheet piling that's already in place? Is that something that would require complete deconstruction?
No, that's why we're talking about a special sheet piling treatment over the culverts. And it would be easy to come in at a later date and simply, if you needed to make it bigger, cut out some small sections of the sheet metal. So what we're doing doesn't preclude replacing that culvert in the future.
Okay, that wouldn't change the stability of what you would have in place
No.
if they went in and cut sections out.
I'd like to see some permeability tests on that thing and just see if anything goes through that. I mean, after having trains driving on it, I mean, those things are heavy. They're going to
Are
protect
we all
that
just
stuff.
turning off on either side? Sure.
I wonder, yeah, that's what I wonder, if we're kind of imagining things here. But I don't know, maybe we are, maybe we're not. It's hard to know.
All right, we certainly don't want to change the hydrology of Goose Pond. If there was any change, I think we will certainly look into that. I think that there are some benefits, perhaps, to reducing the freshwater influx into that upper edge of the salt marsh. But we will look into the permeability issues.
So, in my, I think my last comment on my quick review is the invasive species aspect of this. The pictures in the notice of intent are 3 seasons old. Land Bank Foundation in town has done extensive work on invasive species eradication out there. And as we all know, it's full of Japanese knotweed, and the roots are still there, and I'm concerned about it growing through the pavement. And if they're going to do any sort of change in the grades, where is the dirt going to go, and it's not spread around the island like other that projects have done.
Or the fill that's being brought in to level out along that sheet piling, just.
And at the rate that we're working on the Phragmites, it's going to be, at least on the salt marsh side, it's going to be, won't be a barrier to people getting off your area to the salt marsh because it's going to be gone.
Fantastic.
Yes, I know. We worked hard.
We might be all gone too by that time, but it would be good to have it gone.
I'm optimistic there'll be a small window.
To enjoy it?
Greater window.
So I think we need to address the invasive species issue in the soil sometime.
Yeah, this, as I understand it, this is actually a net fill project, not a borrow project. So the material would have to be brought in to backfill behind the sheet pile, and it would not be exporting any soil from the site.
Have to be clean.
So it would have to be clean fill to come in.
Yeah.
We do on other paths, particularly out here where we don't have the sheet piling. What we do is we put in a root barrier along the edge of the shoulders to attempt to keep roots of invasives from growing in. But it is simply a long-term maintenance project. You do have to mow the shoulders very regularly to keep the invasives out, because as Bruce said, his group has done a great job of whacking back the knotweed and other things. But we still have privet and rugosa rose and ivy and a few other things out there to contend with.
I think Bruce is right. The knotweed is a particular problem because it is. I've seen it grow through concrete, so it's.
Phragmites does too.
And probably not so much, but the knotweed goes through barriers like
it just rips things up.
Again, it's.
One quick question.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I've been listening, and you guys are all asking all the questions I would have to. My question was, there was a lot of engineering work done by the town through our comprehensive wastewater management plan 1, 2, and 3, and I know Carr's done quite a bit, and Cormac might be involved too with the Consu Springs restoration project, essentially. But there might be some information out there that could be helpful as far as hydrology, and I was curious as to whether they had looked at that.
Not that we've seen. No, sorry, we've looked at the results of that report so far, and we haven't seen anything that really relates to the hydrologic questions here.
Okay.
And
Cormac?
Just one more. I'm just thinking. The fence along the sheet metal, is it going to be like a split rail? Okay. Again, the land bank and the town have worked hard to clear that view shed from Union Street across the pond to the marsh that now is going to have a split rail fence through, or 2 of them through the middle of it. So you should consider that also.
I guess then you have to balance that against safety concerns. I mean, you can't have people just riding over
It'll be
that.
a nice drop-off into Goose Pond for that.
Finally, let's start having people use some common sense if they go off too bad.
Yeah.
It'll be a soft landing.
When it's your kid that does it, though, it's a different story.
No, it isn't. Yeah, that's how he learned.
It's a harsh reality.
Right. Sorry, I guess it's.
I think Cormac still had some.
We're getting to that part of the night.
But really, I mean, I absolutely take your point, Bruce. You know that I'd much rather to see something more low key and less visually obtrusive. But from your point of view, obviously, it's a different story.
Yeah, the fence we generally propose for bike paths is even bigger than what you allow, what would generally found to be allowed on the.
Is it? Yeah.
Hey, Corm?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier, Nantucket Land Council. From our point of view, it's somewhat ironic that the town is back with VHB when there's an existing enforcement order on another bike path project that were worked on about 2 years ago. But such as it is. But I do want to make that point because please take this order. You do take your order seriously, but take it in sort of that context that we don't really know exactly, or from my standpoint, who the applicant is. I think it's Mass DOT represented by the VHB, which is then going to have a contractor hired, most likely will be Victor, and then will be oversigned by who? VHB or the town. The last time with Hummock Pond, there was a explicit statement in the narrative from VHB that a biologist would be on site at all times for the construction portions of the project, and that wasn't done. I think it was just a lack of oversight between the contract that was drawn up between the town and VHB. But again, there's a lot of things that could go wrong here when the contractor isn't present for the actual discussions, and we saw that so often with that project. And that there has to be clear communications with what you want, with what the plans are, with what the boundaries are, limit of work, disturbances, and whatnot, in terms of what you're expected and what VHB expected and what the contractor is hopefully going to do in the future. In terms of the work itself, the Land Council paid for a study on behalf of the town of Nantucket. I believe Horsley Whitten did it. It was to look at the hydrological connection between the salt marsh and Consu Springs. There was tide gauge data. There was stream flow data. There's a lot of data in terms of the hydrology of the site itself and what was necessary. And the recommendations ended up that there would be a larger box culvert at a different elevation. Nothing you guys can do about this in terms of my frustration that we have this amazing project segmentation again since 1996. I think this has been going on, and now, again, yes, the culvert cannot be built until the sediments get dredged, is what the essence is, and we do something about the ducks as well. But because if we're going to increase the flow both in and out on different tides, we want the sediments to be dealt with. So, yes, there's a timing issue, and the culvert can't necessarily be built. But I bring up that study because the study was based upon existing conditions in terms of, yes, this is somewhat of an impermeable barrier, but there is some connection between the flow here. And if you are now putting sheet piling from here to there and from there to there, I imagine, and I'm not an engineer, but I imagine that there's going to be some change in those hydrological calculations that they had in terms of what is necessary for that culvert. I just don't want to spend another 10 grand on doing another study because now that there's all this and we have to size it again. So I think it's in everybody's best interest, the town's interest. I hope maybe it's not necessarily in your guys' purview, but the town should be stepping back and saying, how is this sheet piling going to affect what we're planning to do in 3 years' time? Do we have to do another study, or do we not? I think I would advise the town to really look at that. And then what is in your purview in terms of, yes, how it does impact that hydrological flow. And if you are now creating just one solid channel, perhaps you are increasing the flow going in and out. And if you have a basin with toxic sediment that is acting as a sink right now, we want to change that at some point, but it's acting as a sink. We might not want to
give that a little bit more of an outlet at this time. So, and again, that's from, I admit, somewhat of a layman's standpoint, but I think there needs to be some engineering sort of look at that, to look at that a little bit further. In terms of the rules and regulations, you have, as they outlined, various delineated wetlands. There's no waiver request for any of the work being done specifically within 25 feet of a salt marsh and 25 feet of a bordering vegetated wetland. That has to be before you to discuss the project, so I imagine that'll be before you next time you're here.
Excuse me, it's a state project, we're not subject to the bylaw.
I don't know. Under local bylaw, you're subject to the local bylaw.
Under MassDOT, state agencies are not subject to it.
Who's the property owner?
Property owns the town.
Well, I think the town is who you
I'll-
regulate then.
I'll-
or a contractor.
I'll sort that out.
We can get an opinion on that.
Yeah, you can easily get an opinion on that, and then at the end of the day, if the town probably wants to work cooperatively with you, if you guys want to look at the waiver request, they could probably get the no alternative, no impact waiver. I can't even remember it. Emily knows much better than I do. They could probably go that route, but they have to prove that they're not making an impact. Thus, the discussion about the hydrological connection. In terms of the invasive species, there's an existing permit right now for this, which I don't know where it is in terms of when it's set to expire and when it's not. I just want to know at the end of the day that there's going to be connections between those two permits in terms of maintenance work and ongoing work. Because if we have one permit that they're under versus another permit that it's under, there might be some confusion going forward. But let me again stress, long-term maintenance and oversight of this project is going to be key, because past history tells us that we need to pay more attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could, MassDOT will have a full-time resident engineer on site for this project. It's being paid for by MassDOT, so they will supply a resident engineer full-time on site.
I'm curious about the exemption that you mentioned. How far-reaching is MassDOT's sweeping salt?
Well, it's all state agencies are not subject to local jurisdictions.
Just like the military did with us.
Right. The federals are not subject to state regulations, the state is not subject to local. I can provide you the letter on that.
But there are overlays, aren't there? There really are. Gosh.
Well, we'll find out.
We'll find out. The reason the Coast Guard comes to the Conservation Commission because their authority, Conservation Commission's authority comes from the federal law, which is the Clean Water Act, and therefore they're subject to the Clean Water Act, which means they're subject to everything underneath it, which includes the local Conservation Commission. So I disagree with this.
We can argue about this some other time.
I'll sort it out.
Yeah, sounds good.
I read all that.
Okay.
I can just add something. So is this just being reviewed under the state act then? There's no local permit being filed? So you won't issue no NAN, you'll just issue a state?
I didn't realize that.
Yes, as it's applied for right now. Unless that changes. Let's we clear that up, that it's subject to both.
Let me just suggest, if I could, Mr. Chairman, that if the commission has thoughts on the local bylaw as town and Nantucket land, then perhaps you could communicate with the owner through your staff.
I think that's a good idea.
Pretty easy.
And that in terms of the jurisdiction, it goes beyond, well, you guys also have a lot of authority beyond the bylaw. You have authority as it's written in the state in terms of the enabling legislation for Conservation Commission in terms of the protection of open space. Thank you.
Not look a gift horse in the mouth.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's a good project. You just have to ensure that we do it properly. And there are definitely some issues and questions we need addressed. So, is there anything else from the public or from the commission on this? Yes, sir.
Richard Valero, and I'm the abutter of this project. I live down here. And I went to the first meeting over the bicycle path. First of all,
This car trail is underwater 6 or 8 times a year minimum with the high tides. And to put something over this, I think you're putting a bicycle path, a cart before the horse. The main sewer line from all of Stop and Shop in the whole area comes down here, runs across this bed. Down here there's manholes, which the young lady's left from DPW, but I've called over the years when Mohammed and Mr. Willard was there. His pipes overflow on a regular routine in the summertime because the main flow is too small to handle that whole area up there. If you go down on Orange Street here and open a manhole at midnight, the pipe is full running so fast. So they let it overflow, and Mohammed said, what are we going to do about it? We can't do anything about it, so just let it overflow. I would say to Mohammed, if it was my sewer, it'd be a problem. But this sewer line has got to be over 60, 70 years old. So the town's redoing all the sewer lines in. This sewer line's going to have to replace someday. It can't be eliminated because it supplies a third of the island to go down C Street. And it's underwater. I thought there was a note, when you say 25-foot buffer zone, it's not a buffer zone, it's underwater at least 6 or 8 times a year, minimum.
Right over the top of it.
Well, right over the top of it, you can't, it's impassable. And I maintain this road here. 25, 30 years ago, I put a Belgian block entrance because of the way Orange Street and everything comes, the water flows down, runs down through, and runs into this manhole and into this corner. So it would wear this road out. So I put a Belgian block berm there so it wouldn't wear the road down. And I used to maintain this road up until about 2 or 3 years ago, but because of the bicycles going down there, it slows the bicycles down. When they come flying out around this corner here, they run into the cars and stuff, and there's been accidents before, so now the people that do use it, it's only Nantucket people that really use it. They know it's there, they use it, and they know to slow down. It's been fine. And when I talk to Mr. Burns and that, now I'm going to talk as a trucker. It's the most ridiculous thing to put a bicycle path over that, even though you're a bicycle. They don't show the plans how they're going to get the bicycles from town down Washington Street, and then when they get on Orange Street, that's the main artery of Nantucket. Every truck that supplies asylum goes down Orange Street and Washington Street. And as it is now, in the summertime, I've had days where it takes 40 minutes to get from the boat to my garden center. If you dump bicycles out on Orange Street and Washington Street and push people to go that way, the traffic is going to be a nightmare. And plus, when the bicycles come out here, you're a bicycler, everything on Orange Street is on the right-hand side of the road. So when they get out on this road here, they're going to go down. You got hatches, you got marine lumber, you got food for here and there, you got the commons, you got the rotary down the end. And then when you get all the way down, where's the bicycles going to go? Every bicycle is going to have to cross the road to get to the other side of the road. Instead of 40 minutes, it'll take 2 hours to get from the boat. And there will be accidents. And most people that come off of the bicycle ride on Nantucket, to visit Nantucket, they're not coming off the boat to go down Orange Street to go to Wisconsin. They come off the boat to ride through town and see it, maybe go to Surfside and that, day trippers and that. The hardcore people will go down Wisconsin Road, but they go through town first. They're not going down Orange Street. Just the people that live in that area will go down and ride a bicycle. Most of them don't ride bicycles down Orange Street. It's too busy. You can't cross the road. It's going to be a big mistake to put a bicycle path through there. And for me, I live down here. The bicycle path goes down. It's going to make it easier. I'm getting older. I got grandchildren. It'd be easier for them to go to town than me to walk to town. You can't put bicycles on Orange Street and Washington Street. It's ridiculous to do that. It's going to be a nightmare. Just by everybody living here. I don't ride a bicycle. The trucks think about it.
Yeah.
Every bike that goes down is going to have to cross the road. But anyway, even if it's done, the sewer nets should be all done first. Because you don't want to put a bicycle path and then tear it up again. Because they're over 60 years old. They've got to be 80, 90 years old, I would think. And it's going to be addressed, that sewer anyway, because they're working their way through, doing town first.
A lot of these comments for the property owner, as much as for wetland resource impact.
Well, I'm saying I look out the window, I know when it's underwater.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lived there all my life.
Some of the other things that are broader in scope about sequencing of the projects and what they're going to do is stuff that really the Board of Selectmen owns the property they would benefit from hearing this more than, we're limited in what our.
But I hate to do the project and then 5 years down the line, I gotta rip it up and put a sewer line in it.
Exactly.
I mean, that doesn't make sense.
That's the way it's done, though.
You know, I mean, it's just, let's do common sense. I don't care if the state has, says they could just do whatever they want, but let's do it right if it's gonna be done.
Makes sense.
And when it's all done with the bicycles, everybody will say, I wish I never did it. That's the only comments I
So
would say.
for the record, my name's Shane Valero, and, most driveways are only 8 feet. And to have a bike path being 14 feet with 2 feet on each side, I think is a little unnecessary.
It's 10 feet.
10 feet? So, obviously, that's pretty big.
But you're gonna have to make it wide, because it's not 10 foot wide in a lot of
Yeah,
places.
if anybody's gone down there, it's very narrow from the culvert down, and up here, it seems wider because obviously you don't have the shoulder going down as much. And I definitely agree, from this point to the culvert, there shouldn't be a fence. So when you go around Constitute Springs, you can look across and see the water and the beach and everything else. It's very nice. You only need a fence from this short period where it actually drops off quite a bit,
Is that something that
Is there any
specific
plan
guidelines
showing what's connecting all this stuff here?
Outside of this project?
Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah, no, I
been-
know it's not your board.
No, but the new bike path advisory committee is called BPAC, Bike and Pedestrian. I can let you know when their next meeting.
Well, I know I went to the original meeting.
Oh, okay.
And there was only two people that spoke for it. It was Reinhardt and some fellow that has a bicycle tour that goes around Tom Nevins. And everybody at the meeting, there must have been 50 or 60 people. Mr. Burns, you were there. Okay? And there was no positive with those two people for this. And then in the paper, a month later, they put in the paper that they had a positive meeting. And it was not positive zero, so it's...
this bar right here is like a hidden gem for most Nantucket people. The Boys and Girls Club use it in the summertime. A lot of people use it, but it's kind of like...
Which is fine. And actually, it's been used less now lately, and the swans have been coming back because there's no dogs and chasing them and everything. The wildlife has been coming back. There's been swans there.
My whole life going up and down this trail is kind of like, get to a certain point in the day, you don't want to walk down the trail because it's so overgrown. And the town's done a great job the past 3 to 5 years by clearing it out, and now people actually use it. So it has made a big difference.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to see a highway down there.
But most of the people walk over it. There's a lot of people walking on it, which is fine. They curb their dogs and stuff now. They don't see them running around like they did years ago.
Well, I think we are kind of wandering off our jurisdiction here, so.
But it is underwater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It does go underwater.
Yeah.
Good information.
Okay, are we ready to
Thank you.
move on here? Thanks. So, there's no further comments. We'll continue this, I guess, if you guys would like to continue.
Certainly. Can you give me a list of what you'd like us to pull off?
Well,
Maybe Jeff can follow up with.
Yeah, I think I can, for my notes, I think I can provide you something in the morning.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'll put a little summary together.
so 2 weeks, or how long would you like?
If we need a plan for a site visit,
I would say so.
if you're gonna look for flagging the limits of work, and some of the substantive information, it's gonna be difficult for us to get that to you. We'd have to get that to you next week in order to make your next hearing. So I think we'll be off until the end of April.
So,
There's the 16th, and then the meeting after that's April the 30th.
I think that's reasonable. That would give us time to respond to all the questions and schedule a site visit on you.
so unless I hear an objection from the commission, we'll continue this to the 30th? Okay. So
One question, do we have any question, as far as a state project only at the moment?
Correct.
Not under the bylaw? And do we have any uncertainty about that, or do we intend to?
I'll verify that to confirm it, since there seems to be some dissenting opinion.
Well, some reaction at the table certainly, but so we're gonna learn more about that.
Yep, I'll double check with town council to be sure, but I was under a similar impression as the VHB. So,
But if it is town-owned property, then how can it be? Well, I'm sure you'll let us know.
I'll summarize something for you guys to read. Sure. We'll get all the correct references in there so everyone can read the language.
Okay.
Instead of kicking it around now.
So that moves us to amended orders. Kaplan, 37 Halbert Ave.
Thanks for waiting, guys. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. For the record, Paul Santos from Nantucket Surveyors. This is an amended order request for a property that recently received an order, specifically 37 Halbert Avenue, which many of you may know as the former Sawyer residence, located on the harbor side of Halbert Avenue. The reason we're before you is I was in the process of working on the project with the architects, and they made it through the HDC process, and I had noted some slight changes between what we originally submitted and what the HDC finally approved. So I wanted to bring the filing in accordance with the HDC approval. And also a couple of construction items that have come up during the evaluation of the building. So again, that's what we're filed for. The front, it's pretty, not really too dramatic, but the front was shown here as two separate additions with a stairway up the middle. It's now a connected addition with an open porch at the front side of the building. And the stairway configuration is a little bit different. This is all occurring outside of the 50, but within the 100-foot setback. And we are in land subject to coastal storm flowage. The 100-foot setback would be from the timber bulkhead, which essentially acts as a coastal bank. And the only other change, other than the front area architectural changes, was it appears that they're going to be reconstructing the pier system and the back porch and deck area, which is along the back side of the structure. And in so doing, the set of stairs that are located here on this plan are being realigned slightly along the back side of that porch and deck area. In case we had to do any work on the pier system of the existing porch, I did include that within the new plan and the amended order. We did ask for and received waivers under the original application. I've asked to confirm those as part of the amended order, and we've submitted a new plan which now ties back into the HDC approval. And that's what the amended order is for.
Any questions?
So it was fun to
Anything from the public? Okay. Jeff, do you have a recommendation on this?
I would recommend that we can issue this as an amended order.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Okay, Sarah?
spend a lot of money on it.
Yes.
And I'm
Aye.
Jen?
happy to
Aye.
say that
Aye.
it's got a good
Aye.
response.
Andy, aye.
Mike? Aye. That motion
Up on
carries
their
unanimously.
website before the
Oh,
county.
Nope, those are yours.
I'm accused of
Okay, Becker, 34 Summer Pond Road.
Do you have a copy of the plan with the art?
For the
I
applicant.
haven't seen much art tonight.
It's his off week, don't worry.
I had my share. For the applicant, Art Gasparo, Blackmore Associates, we're in front of you tonight requesting to amend an order of conditions that allowed for some renovation work to the structure located on the harbor. So we're within the buffer zone to Coastal Bank. The amendment has two components. One is to allow an addition, or it's a second-story expansion above the kitchen within the same footprint. So it's a second-story, it doesn't change the footprint, but it is located within the 25-foot buffer zone, as the existing structure is. The other portion is this crosshatched area to put a porch on the side of the house that's opposite of the resource area. It's outside of the 50 except for this small sliver, which is about a foot 18 inches wide. So that would be, there was already a waiver associated with the project. We don't think that this is going to have any substantial change on the project as approved, and we'd be happy to try to address questions or concerns that you may have.
Any questions?
I've had a request from a couple of citizens at our meeting.
Jeff, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, so we can issue this as an amended order as well.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, Sarah?
To get a extension of the season.
Ian?
Aye.
Ernie? Aye.
Andy, aye.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries with Commissioner Carberg recused.
Already in here.
26 days, a harsh winter, 26 days
Okay,
lost.
C&D and LLC, 9399
Guys,
Middle
please
Point
grant
Road.
grant them
Mr. Chairman,
an extra
on
box
this application,
for 3.
I have a revised
For 3
plan
weeks.
with me that I
I'm
was
not-
hoping to
not
present,
number
which
of
reduces
days.
the scope of work.
6 bucks.
So it didn't come in before the
strong.
deadline, but essentially what happened, if I could explain I don't want to take the time to show you a plan when I know I have a revised plan that has less work. And then if you want to continue, because this was new, I don't want to go over a plan that's not going to be what's proposed. We are located out at 93 and 99 Neil Point Road, and this is the project that has the zigzag fence and quar tube installation that's been in for a couple of years that we've been monitoring for you. And what the purpose of the amendment was to ask to, since this project was permitted, there have been additional projects permitted at the Welsh property, which is that narrow one, that narrow lot, which there's an installation that exists here of zigzag fence plus tubes. So we're proposing to connect to their existing installation on that end. Before that was, when we originally permitted this, we had left about 36 feet at the end for an area for additional nourishment. Well, that now, because the other one being approved, leaves a gap. So what we would like to do is just to connect on the westerly end. What I've shown in pink is essentially, or is, the scope of the work that's proposed on that end. On the easterly end of the property, our original amendment, our property owner has been responded to the RFP to the town for the yard sale to take possession of this parcel right here. He won the award from the town, has a letter from the town to that effect, but has been working with town council for quite some time to finalize the taking of that title.
Mr. Chairman, having
we
done
thought
this
that
a
was
few
going
times
to be
before,
handled by
you
this
can
time,
extend the
by the
season.
meeting. So our
You
application
can set
had included
the hours
putting
of the
that work
days
in that
that
area.
you're.
In fact, that has not been
and
able to be
we've-
resolved.
Requires is you
between
do send a
town
letter
council
to the state
and our
telling
owner.
them
So
that that's
the
what
revision that I'm
they've
here
done.
before
But
you
as
tonight
Mr.
is
Brace
to
points
remove
out,
that
the later
work.
you
So
go,
we no longer have any
water
work
warms up
located
and the
within
scallops
parcel.
they start
There's
to go
still
bad.
a
It
piece
is a
that's about
time
18
issue.
feet long that didn't have
We have
tubes
done
on
this
the end.
before.
The fence is already right there. If the commission felt strongly that we shouldn't do sort of that little piece, I don't think it's the end of the world to me. I thought that while we were here, instead of just taking it off completely, I would put the discussion there. And if the commission felt strongly that until this whole thing is resolved, to leave that. The other end, I think, makes a lot of sense because you're between the two. Now, all that being said, there's of course an existing installation here as well, so we still are left with that piece until something happens. And we'd be proposing the same exact, to match what's there in terms of the double rep quad. And again, the fence is all in place already. So it's just adding. The fence isn't in place, excuse me, right here. It stops. Here it is. So we'd be adding that little bit of fence and the tubes there. That is, and there's the other thing that I would like to mention to you is that I owe you a storm report for last week. I have that with me. I've prepared it. I've copied it for everybody. I don't know if you want to incorporate a discussion about that into this, or if it's something for your next meeting and I should just submit it to the administrator. I'll leave that to you, Mr. Chairman. Like I say, I put the report together. I have the photos. I have for that event. And again, I just want you to know that while we're here for an amendment, we're also keeping up with our responsibilities.
The only reason we were having this
per the
conversation was
order.
it blew 90 last week and it blew some of the grass off. And there's some
Yeah, you
clean
guys,
skulls.
it took the brunt.
Those skulls will
because
also
Wisconsin
spat
was
for next
actually
year
the
and leave
northeast
skulls for the following year.
8
So,
hours
you know, I
instead
think
of
that
shifting to the northwest.
if this
Right,
request
and I
had come
think
2
that
weeks
really
ago,
with this
maybe we
storm,
would have
you
changed
know,
it. We would
it
have
was the
changed
short
it to look at it.
duration that
We're
really
already
limited the
in the
impact
second of
of
April.
wherever it
We
was.
could
You know,
still
while
have
it was
special
intense, it
meetings,
was fast, it was
but
quick
it's still gonna
moving.
be another 4 or 5
And we did
days,
lose
and
some
that's gonna
sand,
take
as I've
it.
documented here.
The
We
middle of
had
April, I just
one
think
of the
it's
fence
too late.
panels was partially dislodged, so I show that, and we'll fix that. And we're in the midst of the repair maintenance that I had gone over with you about a month ago, in terms of the tubes are being rebuilt and we're set up. Now, one change that occurred as part of this, when they went to do that repair this time, is that we were approved for the use of staging by using a machine to scoop out of a dump truck. I got out there this time and they had a conveyor belt set up. Now, that's obviously a development from the East End project. So what I've done is I wanted to sort of memorialize that to the commission, because it is a change in the methodology that was approved. So I put a note on this plan that said conveyor or machine staging, if the commission was amenable to that. It seems to me that the conveyor is certainly less impact the way they set it up, and that it's a preferred solution. But again, it was a variation from what was approved, so I didn't want to have a conveyor and a picture, and then where did that come from? And so get that out there as well, that was, you know, just in terms of the delivery, the method associated with the project.
Any questions?
No. We'll take one.
Do you want the storm reports, or
you print
or
it
no,
out?
at the end of the meeting?
Yeah. Always look at it.
They have the photos.
Take a look.
Bill can get them on the website.
Jeff, I can send it to him electronically.
Yeah, that would be great.
Great, thanks, then.
If you want to just go through this, I mean, really, the very last page is where I put the actual storm.
Let's look at that.
In terms of what we had for wind, the duration, the maximum, and
That was pretty good, Jim.
you know, I think that using this one chart, it shows you right around 8 in the morning is really where you know, things seem to have started to pick up, and like I said, we lost sand. We didn't lose any kind of the fabric. There's no. This project's been good in terms of we've been able. While we've had some of the stuff that deflates, it remains in place, which is important to me. That's the case. And we also have. You know, I've been working hand in hand with the contractor, with their foreman. Also, this particular owner has his landscaper very, very involved in terms of, you know, that's who's handling the plantings and whatnot. I'd be happy to walk through the pictures, you know, from before the storm. And again, that was sort of some of the same stuff that we had showed you for what we were repairing. And then just after the storm, really the west end is holding up a little bit, excuse me, the east end is holding up a little bit better than the west end. But again, it's hard to predict. It seems to me to have to do with the sort of scalloping of the beach and slide off the shore, shoaling. But and what we're really looking to do is to, you know, finish up in the next week and a half or so, and then hopefully, you know, we're through sort of this storm season, and then we'll have our sand template back, have the paths. I've been continuously speaking with them about how important it is that right along here, when we come back and put that sand in, that's the path, and it worked very well last summer. That it doesn't happen often, especially with the summer beach, but should the tide reach the fence, there's a way that any pedestrian just walks across there, and they've sort of elevated themselves about 3 or 4 feet. There's a little navigation that has to happen at the 2 staircases. One of them are pretty easy to go over, and one of them are pretty easy to go under. You know, I've looked at that in terms of if that was ever another issue. Maybe you look at almost a Chapter 91 type of stair, but at this point, there's no complaints. It seems to be working. So that's sort of where we're at with this. And happy to address any other questions you might have.
So now, are you looking to do both ends of the project here then? or-
If you'll, again, as part of the amendment, to take it back to the application before you right now, it's the two pieces in pink is what we would be proposing. However, we did revise the east end to not be within the town-owned the parcel that remains owned by the town. And again, we're mobilized right now, and we're also now moving from this project to this project, so that during the appeal period, that we can come back and touch those two ends up as all part of this mobilization, and sort of what we were trying to accomplish. Because once again, and I've been in touch with Vern as well, and Locke, and I'll be writing a letter to Jeff the next day. Our bird monitoring on this starts on the 15th, so our order. When the other project came up earlier, I did check that order, and it is the 1st. So there's a little discrepancy there, I think, that you have. So I've already been talking to him for the last couple of weeks, so that we can hire him for any work that. Now this project might be done on the 15th, but I think we might still have a little bit of work going on here. But again, you'll have that correspondence back. I just wanted to let you know we're aware of that condition as it relates to the work.
We don't have Jeff to make a recommendation.
And grab it.
Would you, please? Thank you.
Forever.
He's not right there. That's Bruce. That's Bruce and Ed.
Yeah, we do need a new plan.
No, I brought the plan. This is the plan. I brought the plan.
So we've got it in front of us.
Okay. Well, it seems like it could be done as a amended order, yeah.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Sarah? Okay. Jeff, we're voting on a yeah.
Okay. Pause the motion to.
Yeah, okay, it is. Okay, Jen?
Aye.
Ian? Aye. Ernie? Aye.
Andy, aye.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries with Commissioner Oaktai sitting on the fence. No, abstaining.
No, he came in with an amended drawing.
Okay, well, we'll hurry up here. Okay, public meeting, request for determination. Ford at 29 Woodbury Lane.
Excellent. All right, this one, looking at your packet, it's probably easier because the plan is very small. And the gentleman wanted to apologize. He actually, no, it didn't make the packet. That's even more helpful. The gentleman apologized. He had a child that got sick and couldn't make it in to present, so I arranged for him. So what they're looking to do is to install a 16-inch high retaining wall that is, at the closest point, I actually pulled the tape to check it today, is about 58 feet from the vegetated wetlands. So my recommendation was going to be for a -3.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Centering their work in that area for the next
Sarah?
few weeks to make that happen.
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
Ernie? Aye. Andy?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
That motion carries with Commissioner
This is actually the resident engineering services and the engineering support for the extension of the construction.
Okay, minor mods, Dolente at 22 North Beach Street.
I have to recuse on this. But we're okay with
I did.
This is a request for a minor modification. The architects are doing the design
As soon as that's done,
slightly,
then
but everything, this is for, so a couple of things on this is that David Haynes for the applicant.
we're putting all the
Proposed shed,
resources on
which
Broad
that
and South Water.
stays the same. And then this, right in through here,
Yes, they're going to be working
this deck was
till,
approved,
Memorial
but this
Day, so,
configuration of
retirement
deck,
of May
and
still.
there's some plantings that are being done, or planter that's being put in here. It all remains outside of 50 feet from the
from the bordering vegetated wetlands, and there's no structures, no waivers being requested. Okay.
Any questions?
Jeff, do you have a recommendation?
I recommend that we can approve it as a minor
Definitely
mod.
will have
So
that.
moved, Mr. Chairman.
Sarah?
Yes, I.
Okay, Ernie? Aye. Andy?
The on-site
Mike?
offsite in the
And that motion carries with Commissioner Carberg recused and Mr. Golding abstaining.
Thank you very much.
Okay, certificates of compliance.
Sure, so this Sanford here, let me just put this away. I can get out the plan for us to see too, if you want to see it. This was for the reconstruction of a concrete pad out on Easton Street. It's on 2 properties. I don't know if anyone remembers this one or not. It's from a couple of years ago. But it was for the construction of that concrete pad that was damaged in the storm. They had to rebuild it. They just rebuilt it in place, and I would say it was built in compliance. I would recommend the issuance of a certificate.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Okay, Sarah?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Ian?
Abstain.
Aye.
Andy, aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And that motion carries with Commissioner Golding
This was
abstaining.
declared by the United Nations, and there are only
Okay. Now we go to orders of conditions.
All right, I do have drafts for you. Just give me 1 second.
So today, throughout the world,
apologize for having
iconic landmark peptides.
Run out. We had some scallopers show up who wanted to extend their season, and
I went around today with photographers, so uplifting.
we didn't want that to happen.
And this is all.
Normally their threats are just idle that they're going to come and do that. This time,
I wanted to tell you the Center for Disease Control has just released last Thursday these
Center has
there was
something.
one of 3 children diagnosed with autism, and that's one.
All right, so the first one is Thompson. That's one of the projects we closed last time.
And that's what.
This was Stan Humphrey's project.
So we're here.
That was for the solid core logs with the sand cover. The sand cover was to be a mix of, and it's in the order again. It's a 40-40-20 gravel sand silt mix. When I had notes from last time. Hopefully, I wrote it down correctly. That we didn't find that the solid core logs like that were a coastal engineering structure. So
We didn't. We did.
I written down that we didn't, but that doesn't mean that we can't change that.
I would rather do it as a structure and then grant a waiver than not have
Sure.
it as a structure.
All right, so, well, I'll change that finding 4 then, if that's the will of the commission to read.
Which one is this?
Thompson.
Yes, is this Fargo?
Yes, this is Fargo Way.
14 Fargo.
So I could have written it down in my notes.
Four?
Yeah, finding number 4, I think we're going to change that from the sound of the board. No, there's no fence
There's no
anymore.
fence, that's why you talk about
Oh,
structure.
Yeah,
There's still a revetment.
no, this is the one, there's some solid core logs stacked up that are held in place by posts, and there's no fence.
Okay. The
And
one I have has,
and they're solid logs. No, I thought they were,
It says slopes and revetment on the...
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
it
sorry,
does.
I missed the total. That's incorrect.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Right?
Yeah, that's good. Sorry. I started with a template one.
That's definitely a structure.
Yeah, so it's the construction of a core log
Right.
assembly.
Where is the, where's the residence?
And I missed the salt marsh in
Well,
the.
if it's a single core log, we haven't called it a structure. If it's a single fence, it's not a structure. If it's 2 fences, it's a structure. If it's a fence plus a log, it's a structure.
Well, this one is.
Multiple logs.
This is.
Stress the importance of early
Yeah.
diagnosis
This is
into solid
essentially 2 larger logs with 3 smaller logs that just at the bottom there's just single posts, little 4x4 posts to hold the bottom one in place. But there's no fence.
I thought the bottom logs were sand filled.
the achievement of the
Am I
United
mistaken?
Nations relying on.
They're solid.
They are solid, huh?
2015. and
That
other
was the
internationally agreed upon.
I even saw a standard.
Because we had to see that before.
Yeah, that was the big, I think
Big
that's,
is it, isn't it?
yeah, because I remember we talked about it before, and that's how I'd written it down, but that certainly doesn't set it in stone. Of course, maybe we can have that discussion now, that's for sure.
So we're all fresh.
Excuse me, so the tubes that are there are 2 bottom rows that are 4 foot by 3 foot that are filled with sand, and then 2 top rows of 2 by 1.5 to be filled with the kind of that gravel mixture within core. So it's all within core. So the one is sand and the other one is the gravel mix.
Okay, well then. Okay.
Yes, and then to hold the face of it is a single green oak 4x4 post that are with 6 foot spacing, I believe, in between them. But there's no fence that connects those; they're just single posts. And then the whole thing is covered with that 40-40-20 was their proposal.
In June to cover the 2.
Correct. So I need to fix that construction of a. I'm not going to tell you which order I stole some of these things from.
It's a previous one.
So most of the additional findings was correct. I think Kearney does have a point in number 4, but I don't have any problem with 18 through 28 that I can see.
I know we had long discussions about the nourishment because of the salt marshes.
Yes.
Right, in the monitoring, and making sure that that salt marsh did that get in there as far as how he's going to monitor the vegetation monitoring, not a.
Yeah, they had a separate protocol spelled out in their narrative there for a baseline study.
Mr. Chair, as you know,
I did include in 24 that an adverse impact to the salt marsh areas is one of the criteria, and they have a separate, in their protocol, they put on record a separate salt marsh. They're going to look at it this year prior to construction and do all of their monitoring, and then use that as the base for monitoring going forward. But that was in their protocol. The only thing I really narrated out of there was the gravel, sand, and silt mixture in 28.
Funding
was the only thing I really pulled out of there separate because we haven't really seen that before.
Right, no, and that makes this very different. I really like that because it's way more applicable. It's truly beach compatible and not.
Thank you very much.
Homogenized.
Yeah.
And consolidated sand all at the same time.
So, and then I tried to encapsulate the rest for that waiver to 205B3, that's the adverse effect on bank height, stability, and that whole laundry list of things. I tried to put that together as best I could.
You know, I haven't met recently, but I had talked earlier to Libby. We are going to be trying
I missed that.
Open the parking in the front.
So the only other question I would have is on number 4, as to whether we want to consider this coastal engineering structure or not.
Pittman.
I think if I'm
we have a presence so that people can come and go from the back as well.
I just say I see Ernie's point that sometimes it's better to call something a structure and then grant it a waiver, but I can see both ways.
I think now that we kind of clarified what was out there on the beach, or what was going to go out there, what's proposed, if I remember our discussion, a lot of it was that because it's really just the core logs without an actual fence in front. That was why I think we were. The discussion sounded like
there was a lot of debate about it. So,
structure.
Well, I'll give you the 2 options that we have. Is we can leave the finding as it is that this is not a coastal engineering structure, or if we decide that it is a coastal engineering structure, the cleanest way, because this extends on a good portion of the lot, and a portion of it overlaps where the location of the non-pre-78 home is, that we'd have to grant a waiver to that performance standard. So those are the 2 choices.
think, Ernie?
Well, I would still rather go with it is a structure and grant the waiver than not.
Yeah.
I thought we sort of decided it wasn't last time we discussed it. That was the whole.
Well, and then the discussion there, Ernie, has been granting a waiver for coastal engineering structure for something that's not a.
Well, this also begs into the question with that, and not to interrupt that, with the pre-78 structure, whether or not that structure is afforded to singularly
Yes, thank you, Mr.
the structure,
Chairman.
or if it's
Chairman of the
or the
Cemetery
property,
Commission.
and
I'm
that
here
issue's never
tonight
really
to,
been
request
settled.
the Board
So,
of Selectmen to hold
that's-
a public
Well, I can
hearing
see
to
then why
adopt
we would
the
maybe
cemetery
want to say
rules
it's
and
not.
regulations.
Right.
The Cemetery Commission has been working on these regulations for the past year and a half.
I mean,
We have
honestly, it's
them
not even- they
reviewed
didn't
by
even dig
town
into- it's not
council,
even digging into the
incorporated
first one.
suggestions, and we're requesting April 23rd as the public hearing date.
All right, so
So we've got to rearrange the wording there.
yeah, I'll fix the permit overview, and then I think the rest of it is,
Well, number 4, the not A.
no, the not is,
It's not A.
The A comes after the not. The not goes before
I don't
the
know
A.
what kind of English you guys use, but mine is backwards. All right, I will fix that as well.
Third.
So I'll fix the permit overview, have the right project, and then I'll put the rest.
Thank you.
Move to approve with permit overview amended.
Second.
Sarah,
Aye.
Jen,
Aye.
Ian,
Aye.
Ernie, aye, Andy,
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously. Okay. 12 Gardner
Sorry,
Road.
it's so loud.
That's right, we can turn the volume down on our end, so.
Oh, no, yours is fine, okay. I can mute mine.
So, that's all right. All right, so 12 Gardner Road, this was Art's project tonight. That was for the removal of existing structures, the construction of a driveway with subsurface utilities, and to establish building envelopes with associated wells, septic systems, utilities, and landscaping. I'll point out quickly, I listed septic systems because some of the septic components, like a tank, may be located within those building envelopes, some of which are jurisdictional. However, on the plan, the leach fields are all clearly outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. So they're in compliance with our regulations, so there's no waivers. The only condition that I had was that they store their materials outside of the 50. And I think, I'll be the first to say, I think the applicant understands that when they fine-tune what's going in the building envelope, they have to come back to straighten their permits out. Art knows that.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Move to issue as drafted.
Okay, Sarah,
Aye.
Jen,
Aye.
Ian, Ernie, aye, Andy,
Aye.
Mike. That motion carries unanimously. Okay, the last one we have drafted is Allison Moore Beatles Revocable Trust, 76 Lane. This is my favorite name since Rupp and Butkus.
Rub and Buckus is a pretty good one.
Yeah, no.
I like more people.
Yeah, Allison Peters is a pretty good one. So this was, again, for the driveway, pool, and then the management of vegetation and invasive species. That's there. Again, there are no waivers required. All I added on to this one that's different than the last one was just our pretty typical reporting for vegetation control for a report with some pictures.
So the protocol for the pool would be separate?
The pool, oh, yeah, I need to add that, sorry. Thank you, Ian. So now there'd be number 21, that the pool is to be discharged to areas outside of jurisdiction.
Okay. That one seemed pretty straightforward, too.
Yeah.
I have a motion to issue as amended.
So moved.
Man.
Second.
Sarah?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
Ian?
Aye.
Ernie? Aye. Andy?
Aye.
Mike? That motion carries unanimously.
All right, sir, congratulations. You made it through the entire voting portion of the meeting.
Anything else we want to discuss?
Yep. That's all right. We do have a couple to go through that we closed. We closed The land bank one on 260 Miles Under Skinner's Golf Course. The irrigation installation. Any thoughts, questions, comments, discussion?
Reports.
For the what installation, the irrigation.
Yep, this is the golf course project.
Well, they're going to be watering it anyway.
What?
They're going to be watering it with a hose either.
Right. I mean, the thing is, when Henry and Skinner ran it, they really didn't use any fertilizer. It was just strictly water. I never saw them.
I heard it's a tough course.
Yeah. I mean, they certainly had stuff in the shed. But I guess my long-winded point is that Bruce's point about being as part of the watershed, the zone 2 for the oil field, seems to me an issue.
Thank you.
There's nothing in the application. Well, what does the application say?
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Maybe I'm mumbling.
Well, I wasn't hearing.
Well, I guess we're talking about management. The protocols for management of fertilizer.
Right, and they're not applying for any of that. They're applying for automated irrigation.
Right.
And we can approve that, and the rest of, the rest of it is, they're not applying for hot stuff.
Let's let me have a 10-minute nap.
Yeah, that's all.
So to answer the question about the fertilizers, I think the easy answer with that is even though they haven't applied for fertilizers, they still have to apply fertilizers in compliance with the Board of Health regulations, which is essentially the parent document to the BMP, and the BMP is included. And obviously any other pesticides or herbicides have to be done in compliance with
Whatever
their...
the past practice
with their,
did
yeah.
not grandfather them for.
So to get back on target, if I may. So there was worry about well drawdown and wetland edges. Do we want a monitoring component for that aspect of it? We did ask for to keep an eye on how much water and total is going to be used.
Yeah, I'm sure they could set up a gauge to measure how often they're on or how much water they discharge.
I thought they were going to do some kind of sensors so they would water to an extent.
Correct, is they do in their protocol include provisions for sensors that will monitor down to, it look like the upper 4 inches of soil, and that the sprinklers...
That just cuts them off.
Yeah, will cut them off or won't allow them to run if it's still wet. I don't think I have odd suspicion that a few of those may never run. It's just wet. So, all right. Well, I can put in a monitoring component for the water and reporting. Any other concerns? Culverts. Can we include that condition? The culverts.
Just a little ditty about it. Area.
All right. All right. I think I can handle that.
That culvert is going to be protected. The way that they're installing that, it doesn't. I couldn't quite hear everything Bruce was saying, but.
Yeah, I think the condition we're talking about, Sarah, is just simply one that if a culvert is damaged during construction, that it needs to be replaced in kind.
Bruce said specifically he was worried about a lack of project narrative as the work was inches away from the wetlands, he said.
Right, no, that's a very good point. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I got that.
Yep. All right. So I'm pretty square on that one. Other ones we closed tonight. We closed Oak Hollow Nominee Trust. That was the one off Oak Hollow Lane, ironically.
That's straightforward, right?
Yeah, it was. I thought about writing that order today, but I ran out of time. So
I think that was easy. We did McKenzie and Hughes, didn't we?
We
Yep.
did. And, I personally feel that we should allow them the option of putting a shed at either place because of where it is. And so that's my side.
I agree. I honestly don't see much strong difference between the two locations.
I just want to be sure everyone's okay with either spot having a waiver for no adverse impact. That's what I'm kind of...
Well, I might be an outlier on this one, but Majority
I might
seems
be in that layer in this too.
Well,
I
it's
mean, it
still-
does seem my
It's
mind.
within the,
I'm more worried about the tree.
Yes.
And I hate to see them cut down it.
Hello, hi. I'm John Shea.
Let's go see
Mr.
it.
Chairman, everybody on board, hello, gentlemen.
Is
ladies.
that-
Look, this is, it's so strange because this has been a film shot on Nantucket for 16 years.
I can't imagine.
Yes, and here we have two exactly at the same time, so it's just how funny like this.
Well, we do have the option, if we don't have conditions, everyone can think about
Kingdom Hill or Kingdom County.
both places or one places. We can always,
I think it's worth thinking through. I mean, what-
Yeah.
We're Nantucket filmmakers.
If we think one is going to be
year-round, and I just.
harmful, or how was it said on another
Appreciative of the meeting
one,
of the town.
that we were having a hearing, and the
Last 2
expression
years,
was, oh,
3 years,
imagine
year-round. And so
things
we
that aren't really there.
have
So I think it's worth, you know, if we're thinking through now.
Sorry to ask.
I don't see the difference one versus the other.
Permission.
well, it's one of those, I guess the sense I'm getting is for a positive order, it's just a matter of the location. So I can draft the positive order, everyone can think about it, and then when we get together in 2 weeks and we issue the positive order, we can settle the location. That's an easy edit to make.
Stand, not go in the barracks, stand in the
So.
in front of it.
All right.
That sounds good.
Shoot a scene there.
And that's it.
We have a scene
Okay.
where this Boston police officer
So,
comes to Nantucket.
thanks, Sarah, for
Oh,
sitting in.
I lied. We do have,
enforcement action.
no, I lied from the orders of conditions. I wanted to check on Andrews and Crowder there. I know we are waiting for some issues, the waiver request and things for Andrews, but if no one had any questions about that, if it seems straightforward that if that waiver request was in, we were going to be there, I'll do that. And I thought Crowder was pretty straightforward too, so I can draft both of those too.
There is
All
a
right.
scene where we're pretending that because it's so high.
I just know, I'm looking at the,
Boston to police.
go ahead, Sarah.
You know, and we were.
I was going to say I can come in and sign either tomorrow or Friday, so I'm not physically there to
Well,
sign
the
mine.
real.
Yeah, we'll take care of it in the morning. I'll either send someone to you or you can come to me. But
Okay.
I just asked about those drafts because I was looking at the agenda for the 16th, and it looks significantly shorter, so it'd be nice to clear off as much stuff as we can.
Don't get off the line yet, Sarah, because the enforcement issue with SDPF is next on the...
But I put it on there, and we kind of talked about a little bit as far as letting them do the work to cover the banks and lift the cease and desist only for that. That's why it was on there as a place. But if there's something other want to discuss, you certainly are more than welcome.
I mean, I really feel that we've had the issues.
We're not-
We've
no,
had
no,
5 or
just-
6 issues, but...
Correct.
And I feel that I've been caught in the middle where, there's trying to balance
And the
all these
logo,
competing
if we
interests.
see the
And
Harbor
I
Master
feel
building fire in the shop, we
that
want to
it's
have that on
important for
But-
Comcom going
Police
forward
Department
and
logo,
for applicants who come
the only
forward
thing I
in the
would
future
promise you is that I've been
that
working
we
with
at
the police
least
makers, all of the
recognize
work that the police on.
how
It's about a
this
Boston
hasn't,
police
we haven't had a
department
level of
partner with the Nantucket
continuity
Police Department.
so that we at
Investigate
least
crime that happened in Boston. So we've
say-
been thorough, and I've written a script, I'm
specifically
directing the film.
that there have been
and
these
to be thorough,
infringements.
to make sure that all of this reflects well.
Do you see what I'm trying to say? Because, I mean, we haven't
Yes.
really had the...
We haven't issued a findings of, for enforcement, maybe that's something that's helpful to people, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I am, and at the very least, to acknowledge that, we haven't acted in a way that we might have acted if there had been another group before us with these sort of infringements.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're
My thoughts off the top of my head are, I still think that that's how it should come out. But I do think we should let them recover exposed areas if they can do it safely with the piping culvert restrictions. But I agree with you, MD, and I think it's a really good idea just to say, the commission review to the findings behind our enforcement orders, and I guess we have with police staff, but maybe people understand that. So people understand that we're not doing it, we are doing stuff.
Well, and I think part of it was in our initial discussions, we ended up addressing a lot of those things by putting things on hold, as far as, not letting any more nourishment on the face of the bank, making them cap that pipe with the idea that they would come back in with this NOI, and through the NOI we would resolve what stays and what doesn't stay. That's kind of how I've been seeing why we've been keeping this enforcement
We should still
action
do that.
on there, and that
actually mentioned Hoyts Hall. It had to be formed.
I love the roadway.
And I don't think that was in the
noisier the better.
original
It's a film set in the office.
No, it wasn't included. I think one of the issues with Hoyts Hollow that came up is it was referred to as the access point, and their access point for getting machinery onto the beach under the emergency. And they made improvements to that, and we never really resolved that. I know it's come up that it wasn't explicitly called out for the work that was being done. We can certainly take action on that. I mean, it was clearly a change in what was happening there.
We never saw a plan for it. I think they mentioned it in the very beginning that they'd have to do some.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, I'll be honest, I didn't anticipate the amount of work that was done there. I mean, we certainly can deal with it that way. It's certainly an option.
So during the notice of intent during the first one that it went on kind of a while, and as we're wrapping it up, those guys did ask, do we need to stick around for the enforcement order? Somehow or other we indicated to them not. And I just thought I should mention that just now. And then we have...
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And behind you, you'll
We've got an
see
open
a
notice
map
in front of
showing the
us.
two parcels in
I think
question,
it's worth
A and B.
looking
Holly
seems
Street in this
suggested here, we
location
can
is not constructed.
fold
It's
it
part
if we
of
need to.
landscape
Yeah,
buffer
we're-
between the properties.
We're actually ready to deal with it.
The parcels were bid, and we asked that
I
you
mean, we
guys
certainly can,
purchase and sale.
I mean, close out the enforcement order. If there's, it's obviously going to have to get closed out one way or the other, whether it receives a positive, the original one receives a positive or a negative permit. We're going to have to close that out with some sort of action.
Well, let's get the notice in front of us first, I think, and then keep the enforcement kind of sitting on the back.
Yeah, we keep the enforcement order open at least until we
This
can
is another
notify
street
people we were
that you
going to
have never seen because it's not
Sure.
constructed in Surfside.
Good
Here,
discussion.
the property owners own land on both
discussion.
sides.
Commissioner
They have
comments
a
that I
preservation
meant to send
restriction
to Jeff.
on
I have a second.
the easterly property, and they want to
Go ahead.
join all of the land together.
Okay, I
Again,
might
this
lose
was
you,
bid,
so.
and they also
yeah, I
paid for
noticed
the
I'm
production of
down
the plan.
at, close
So,
to Osprey Way, I guess, at 211
just
Hummock Pond Road.
the one
There on
lot,
Hummock Pond,
the one
and
lot to the
maybe
south,
something
that
we
one
do
right
every
there.
winter, but I don't know, I've been
And
looking
then their
at that
house
area
and
for about 10
cottage
years.
on
and
the
there's
other
some
lot to the west.
really feature vegetative cutting all the way behind, right behind 211, about a quarter mile north and south on that side of Hummock Pond, all the way down to the water's edge. And I don't recall in the years that I've seen that area, which is every year, that intensive of a vegetation removal, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention, specifically to Jeff. I could take some pictures and send it in, but
Right, and on the map
completely
behind you,
sheared
you see
down.
that this is at
There's that little potato
the
wet
far corner. You
field there
can
that's
see the
always
police
sheared.
building up in the upper
Certainly like if Ernie looked at it, you would,
there.
you know, I'd be.
So the board discussed this and
Ernie asked
took a
about
vote on whether or not to offer
Sorry,
this
right along
property,
the road is what Ernie was asking.
make it
Is
available
right
for
along the
affordable
road?
housing.
No, it's right on the
Habitat was a successful bidder, and the deed is before you for your execution.
Or, yeah, by the horse paddock, about 100 feet of buffer.
Okay, Bruce
Down.
seems to know something about it.
I do. And I had nothing to do with it, and it came up 3 years ago, the last time it was mowed. That's Bartlett's owns the land, and I think Phil goes through there about every 3 to 5 years and mows the daylights out of it. And I think must be the
That's why
3 year.
he told that, yeah, he just says, my land and I can mow it as much as I want.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I think
Well,
there's some
I think-
background information in your packet
Yeah, I think
where
what he says, he's been doing it for 40 years, and therefore.
rather quickly there was an acceleration of
Certainly.
erosion
I'm
that affected this
taking a
particular
position on either
property.
way. I'm just-
It's at the
you know,
end of
it's-
Nantucket
it's come
Road
up
where
before the board.
Ames Avenue
It's past,
intersection is
it's
located. Earlier, we had voted yard sale disposition for what are called Denver and Dayton Street, which are shown as parcel 2 and 3
I can get in
on
touch
the
with Phil.
map, as well as a leftover remnant of
He always loves to hear from us.
parcel required to construct Ames Avenue, which is what the hand is showing you right now.
Yeah, I'll get in
So,
touch with the Bartletts, and I'll
The
at
time was
least
of the essence to move that house. You
get
can
them
see
to
the old location
memorialize
was
it.
close to the
They
bank.
want to move
Let's bounce
The
back
house
to
was,
reports.
was and is now elevated and put on steel. The property owners have asked for a license from the board to to locate the house closer to Ames Avenue on the parcels of land that we would be eventually disposing of anyway.
Advisory guidelines.
Correct.
For the
condition of that yard sale would have been the grant of a one big beach easement, so they're granting that now. So that's the first action that would ask the board to entertain, would be to accept the grant of the one big beach easement, which covers the area of land highlighted in yellow, which is now below the bank between the toe of the bank and the ocean.
Mosquito control or coastal management plan?
I'll go for coastal.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you can go ahead. I thought you were gone.
Yeah, well, I probably will be maybe in mid-sentence.
Thank you. The next item is the actual license agreement.
We're going to have the final copy once I get off my butt and get the last
lots
changes
and
to
the
Jeff
lot
and the
at
rest
the
of the
corner
team. And we're going to vote on it
available
this
to
week. And then
relocate
it'll
the
be the
house.
draft.
What will follow at some point would be an actual bid for a permanent
Yes, ma'am.
acquisition of those properties, but this will allow the owner to at least move forward, get the house relocated, and then we'll follow up with the permanent paperwork at a later time.
Oh, I do have one shameless plug for my report, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Real quickly, just a reminder to everyone, I'm sure everyone at this table knows that town meeting is Saturday, and that our department has a number of things, including a hopeful water quality biologist that's in the general fund budgeting,
Not
and
on
our
the-
capital
on the
and CPC
license, no.
projects for the
Typically,
boathouse.
when we
If
receive
everyone
a
to go and raise
voluntary
their hand
one
yes
big
if it gets
beach
called, that'd be
easement,
fantastic.
that constitutes
Permits are at stake.
monetary exchange.
Goes in the bank. No.
Remember the one big
But,
beach easement?
yeah, so just as a reminder that
erosion. So
town meeting is on Saturday, 9 a.m. Bring your coffee.
Yeah.
And thanks for calling in, Sarah.
One day, it's a one-day hit, right? You gotta try it in one day.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's not bad.
All right, that's it for me.
Anything else? Okay.
See you soon. I got to meet Mark Ruffalo.
Nice.
I have a question for you, Jeff.
Yes.
The Sacagawea Pond, the beach access route that goes out Sacagawea Road there,
Yes.
the Quidnet folks have traditionally put up snow fence along that.
Yes.
And if you look at the end of that, where it's eroded this winter, there's a bunch of stakes sticking out. And since that's in the town roadway out,
We'll rip them out.
the town,
Yeah, we'll get rid of them. I just haven't been out there in weeks and weeks. So I'll send.
And the board
run 'em
can
over,
put a,
yeah.
a price when we do the permanent offering.
Pull them up so that they don't break off, just blow the surface.
yeah, be there next week. Yeah.
We'll take a look. I have someone that's supposed to go out there tomorrow to look at the public access signs. All right.
Who's going out there tomorrow?
Our guy Dan, he's not going to look for birds or anything.
Oh.
We just need to adjourn formally
Okay.
at some point.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
All right, good job, everyone. 7:30. Congratulations.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Remember getting appointed down there tonight?
Yeah, do you remember we'll get appointed at some point this evening? But when I ran downstairs, they were still in public comment. So I'll let you know.
I was just wondering if I couldn't follow, but I was talking to Kobe.
We're mumbling too much today.
It was going kind of quick there. And,
We were.
And then Needles did too.
Beatles did as well.
And this appointment is to the year 2016.
Hi, Bam Lafarge. Thank you. I've been on 4 non-regulatory boards before, and I applied to the Conservation Commission probably 8 years ago, and I just have a great interest in wetlands and the wetland law, and in one way I'm a little intimidated by it, but I'm hoping I can help the town out. Thank you.
Anybody else tonight? Board members, any questions? So I see a hand right here.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Thad Jones. I've submitted to you an application for a position on Conservation Commission. Though after sitting in on the meeting upstairs, I'm wondering if it might be in my best interest to run away. But I'm very interested in serving my adopted community. In my past job, I've worked in conservation for almost a decade now, managing a 1,300-acre park outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Dealt mostly with forest health issues, and I think if you can read my writing, I've submitted some of that to you. Dealt with a lot of invasive pests, invasive plants, native plant restoration, education, things of that nature. Very much interested in serving this community, and I thought I'd come this evening to see if you had any questions or wanted to know anything else about what I've submitted to you.
I just wanted to say thanks for applying that. You know, there's a lot of, it's nice to get new folks coming here with expertise. You know. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the applicants have to understand we have to make one selection tonight, but we appreciate everybody's interest.
And I will remind the applicants that if you don't get on this time, that we have two seats
Two
available in
seats
about
coming
a
up.
month and a half, so.
Absolutely.
Good.
Thank you
very
much.
We appreciate it. Anybody, okay, up and back? Yes, sir, the white shirt.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Greg McKechnie, and I just wanted to say that I put my name forward because I moved here about 16 years ago. I'm raising my family here. I have a business here, and I believe the Conservation Commission is an opportunity to help protect the well-being of an island that I truly care about. And I think there's a great opportunity to make sure things are happening for the right reasons. I think there's law, science, and hopefully some common sense out there. So
Good.
that's all.
Well, thank you very much. I see Mr. Sullivan back as we keep going around the room.
Good evening. I'm Brian Sullivan. I put my name in because I have participated on the fringes of our local government, different things like the bike path development group, and so now it's time to get a little bit more involved. And this committee, or excuse me, this board, may need some new energy, and that's why I put my name in. So, thank you.
Thank you. I see a hand over here. Yes.
Good evening. I'm Ashley.
Want to step a little closer to the mic so we get to.
Good evening. I'm Ashley Arisman, and I put in my application because I'm interested, obviously, in serving on the Concom. I grew up here and landscaped here for a few years. Decided that the environment was going to be in my future, so I went back to school for environmental studies and water resource management. And I feel that my schooling is kind of necessary for a regulatory board like the Conservation Commission. And my interest is further than I think people might be nervous. I've been attending Conservation Commission meetings pertaining to like Sconset Beach and erosion. My interests are much more than that, and a project of that nature just requires citizen input. I've also been interested in the town's participation in the wetland project off of the Hummock Pond Bike Path. So it's not just coastal wetlands, it's all wetlands and all of our water resources. And I just wanted to introduce myself to everybody tonight and let you know that if I'm not appointed now, I am interested enough to reapply. So thank you.
We appreciate that. As we said, we can only do one at a time, and 2 spots are coming up. So thank you for joining us tonight. Is there anybody else? No. All right. So